Hello and welcome to the live stream. Bit of a rush. Sorry about the short notice, but been shuffling things around, trying to get in a live stream this week. This is the slot that suddenly appeared at the last millisecond. So for those of you that are able to join us, thank you very much. For those of you watching us retrospectively, no problem at all. And sorry again for the late warning, but here we are on a Wednesday, sunny Wednesday in Spain. Very windy though, so I must also I suppose I should have a disclaimer in right now that if the internet goes down, you know why that is, but hopefully it'll stand up and I've got the hard wire connection in. It should be okay. So here we are in the middle of this doubleheader between the US Grand Prix and Mexico. Lots to talk about, lots to think about, not the least of which is Max Verstappen's ever brilliant climb back into contention for the World Championship. Has to be taken seriously now. But how seriously? If you think about comebacks like this, from where Max was to where he will need to be if he's to be the Drivers' Champion in 2025, it is without doubt unprecedented. There is nothing, I can think of nothing in the history of Formula One. I've talked to my mate Corey Pesatoro, who's very good on these stats as well, that remotely would come near this. About the closest would have been John Surtees in '64 when he won the World Championship for Ferrari at the last race. In the last phase of the race, after Lorenzo Bandini, his teammate, took out Graham Hill, who was in contention. Obviously, could have won the championship had he won the race. And Jim Clark, also in contention, led that race virtually all the way and had an oil leak sort of 5 laps from the end in the Lotus. That's about the only similar thing. But of course, in those days, unreliability was a massive factor. If you appreciate today the reliability of the cars and the safety, touch wood, of the cars and the drivers, there is no precedent for what Max faces now if he's to pull this off. The only thing you could say, of course, he's got a lot of things going for him, which is that he's an undisputed number one driver. All the focus is on him. As we know, Giampiero, his race engineer, is also the chief engineer, which is a big thing. And that doesn't happen very often on the pit wall. And that just shows the sort of laser-like approach Red Bull have towards Max, which is a great thing. Why not? If you got Max, just focus on him. If you got Michael Schumacher, just focus on him. Whereas McLaren, as we know, have got, Zach's Masterplan in front of them, which is let's all be happy and slap one another on the back and go racing and all be friends. And of course, life isn't like that. And we've seen now some very lackluster drives from Oscar Piastri, probably related, I think, to this whole situation. But nonetheless, when he goes back to his hotel room or wherever he goes, when he's privately thinking through his future, he will think, wow, I'm ahead on points and I've got a lot going for me. I've got a great racing car. They're not going to let me down mechanically. And I need to just stay focused. And as I suggested in my live stream with Cameron the other day, he needs to think about Max more than he does Lando. And if he thinks about Max, the Lando problem goes away anyway. So that's the way he needs to think about it, in my opinion. Before we get on to a long chat, 40-minute chat I had with Mark Slade just recently, yesterday, about Austin and a lot of the issues that arose from Austin, plus looking ahead to Mexico and what we might expect in Mexico. And it's a fascinating 40-minute chat. I would counsel you to listen to it from beginning to end, because we go off into various different subjects and that one thing leads to another, sometimes to a brilliant story in Mark's experience. And we uncover some interesting, previously unspoken about qualities of not only Max, but other drivers as well. Secrets here, secrets there. It's all there. So I would counsel you to have a listen to that. And then I'll be back to take some questions at the back end of the live stream. Before we do that, I just wanted to put this picture up of Kalle Rovanperä. I think, I may be wrong, but I think he's at the High-Tech factory there, which would suggest that maybe he's going to be with High-Tech Formula 2 in 27, as Colton Herta, the third driver for Cadillac, is in 26, which is a great thing. Colton Herta, very pleased to see that he's doing Formula 2 and he's in that third driver role. Very talented driver. and Brian Herter, his dad, was excellent as well, good friend. And then Kalle Rovanperä, who obviously will be doing what he does now in motor racing with Toyota's backing. We know Toyota have a link with Haas Ferrari, so there you go, there's Formula One. And in Formula 2, I wouldn't be surprised to see him with High-Tech in 27. But there he is, and what a thing, and what a rally he had in the Central European Rally just last week to win it conclusively for Toyota. What a star, absolute star. Sébastien Ogier pushed him hard, but then had a massive shunt, as did Terry Neuville, of course. Anyway, getting back to the business, it is now time to open up the chat that I had with Mark Slade, looking back at the US Grand Prix, while it's still fresh in our minds, and looking ahead to Mexico. So, Mark, wow, what a weekend for Max Verstappen. I see the TV viewers had Charles Leclerc as driver of the day, but I mean, it's kind of difficult not to make Max Verstappen driver of everything, really, from Austin.
Yeah, I mean, he had a near perfect weekend, didn't he? He was absolutely brilliant. The team's working well, the car's working well. It just shows that those changes they made around, what was it, Zandvoort and onwards really carried through. And it looks to me like the quickest car on the grid with Max in it, not necessarily with Yuki, but he's really happy with his car, and his driving and performance reflects it.
When the two McLarens were eliminated on the first corner of the sprint race, I couldn't help but think of your comments. We spoke earlier in the week about how important the sprint race was for getting information.
Yeah.
And as we went into the Grand Prix proper, the guess who had trouble with graining on the left front and lost time with that.
Absolutely.
And then later on, we're overusing the softs. Not that that was directly related to the sprint, but nonetheless, they didn't look anything like as well prepared as Red Bull.
No, I think you're right. And possibly also they didn't learn as much as they could have done about ride heights. So was the car absolutely optimum for the race itself, the rear ride height? Maybe they could have crept it down a little bit. They may have had to play safe. I don't know, it's all speculation, but those are the sorts of things that, and also cooling. You can set your cooling level based on what you've seen in the sprint race. So did they have to play it safe again? Don't know. They may not have done, but it's all these little things that they're just tiny little things that just stack up and stack up and stack up. And if you're not careful, you've lost 1-2 tenths of performance without even realizing. But I think the tyre usage was the thing that really stood out. They had the worst graining, didn't they, on the left front, it looked like. Mainly caused by 16, 17, 18, the very fast, long right-hander. And then I think, as you mentioned in your review yesterday, it just looked to me like Lando pushed a bit too hard after his pit stop. And hurt his tyres a bit, his soft tyres, because he started to catch Charles very quickly. Whereas, I don't know if you noticed, but Charles, when he put his mediums on, he had to pass 3 cars. Admittedly, Nico Hülkenberg and the other one was also, it was Ollie Behrman, wasn't it? They both basically let him through because the Ferrari engine deal. And it would have slowed their race. Well, it would have slowed their races to fight anyway. So it was anyway. I think Yuki gave him a little bit of a harder time, but not that much. But he really looked after his tyres for 5 laps before he started to make inroads into the gap. Whereas Lando seemed to push reasonably hard from quite an early point. And I think that was one of the factors in why, when he got up to Charles, he struggled. And then, of course, you have the sliding around because you're losing lots of downforce, the car's sliding around. And the Pirelli tyres in particular, the surface just overheats really quickly from sliding around, and you just lose a lot of grip. But then, Will Joseph made a really good call to him to back off and regroup, and was quite, gave him some confidence building messages. And I think Charles' tyres did die, didn't they, at the end?
Well, I was going to say, were you surprised that the mediums went off at the end there on Charles' car? I suppose that shows the difference between a Ferrari and a McLaren in some way.
I think so. I think it just reflects how hard Charles had to drive the car to stay. And ultimately, the car wasn't up to it. And I think his rear tyres gave up at the end. And so coming out that last corner onto the straight, start-finish straight, he was a bit of a sitting duck to basically Lando in a faster car with grippier tyres. So, yeah, I mean, it was a bloody good try, though, for Charles. I think they did a really good job.
And going back to the importance of the testing during the sprint race, it was interesting towards the end of the sprint that Max was complaining about the back of the car.
Yeah.
I think he used the word, well, I think he used an expletive, but I got the impression it was too harsh, or maybe I don't know. What do you think they would have done between then and the race? Because I guess it was pretty good in the race, and another example of how good this weekend was.
So most likely just the rear was bottoming too much. You can run the rear lower in the sprint race because it's a shorter race and you've got less fuel in the car. So you've basically got fewer laps to wear the rear skids out, so you can run the car more aggressive to pick up downforce. But the downside is that you are going to get more bottoming. So likely for the race, they would have had to lift the rear anyway, otherwise the skids would have worn out. But maybe they just lifted it another mil more than they would have done otherwise.
Right.
And that just helped the ride. Obviously, there's a price to pay in a loss of downforce, but it didn't seem to bother him too much. I think, there is always a trade-off between the balance and ride. And if you're losing too much pace in the high-speed corners because the car is bottoming and unsettling the driver, then lifting the car and losing a little bit of downforce is going to be a good trade.
Yeah, and just to emphasize that point, it was towards the end, I think, they asked him whether he wanted to make any flap adjustments if he wanted to come in again. And he said, no, car's good.
Yeah.
Which is, we don't often hear that in a Grand Prix, is it? Towards the end of a Grand Prix, oh, no, car's great. Well, I suppose.
No, you've got it nailed, basically. Yeah. The driver's happy with the car. And it's all good.
We were talking a little bit, you and I, about the message to Max in the sort of gird your loins last 6 laps of the race.
Yeah.
And he was asked to press a green deploy button. And I think you've got interesting theory on that one.
Well, it's not something that I've had available. But what I was thinking about yesterday was, so you aren't allowed to change engine map modes after qualifying. So they run the same high performance mode in the race as they do in qualifying. What that meant was when that rule was introduced about, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, that meant the qualifying mode got reduced in pace a little bit because otherwise the engine wouldn't last. But what you can do is you can play around with the amount of both recovery, battery recovery and battery deployment. So in a race, normally the cars are deploying energy as you accelerate, and then to basically improve your acceleration. And then at the end of the straight, you are recovering. So the cars actually slow down before the driver brakes. In an overtaking maneuver, you'll press a button to avoid the cut at the end of the straight. And in fact, you can go another step. If you press and hold the button, normally that means that the turbocharger, which some of the time is generating electricity, is actually used entirely for engine performance. So that's why the cars have such a big boost when they use the full overtake mode. Now, what you could also do, and I wonder if this is what Honda are doing with the engine, is you could also, if your battery's low and your tyre grip is reducing such that you, and you've got a corner where the exit is quite short to the next corner, what you could do is say, oh, I don't want to deploy energy because actually I've got enough power to accelerate as quickly as I can just using the engine itself. And that will avoid some energy dropping. And that means that come the end of the lap, I'll have more available for the start-finish straight. So I did wonder if that's what he was doing, knowing that Lando was looking strong coming out the last corner. Maybe he just wanted to gradually bring his battery up to a higher level in case Lando caught him. It didn't happen in the end, but that was my thought. It might have been a way.
Well, it sounds plausible, doesn't it? That trimming and cutting and pasting where you want to have it around the lap.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to do that in theory, but it's totally legal to do it that way, obviously.
So you're not allowed to vary the basically it's done with the ignition mapping, the actual engine performance fundamentally, but you're not allowed to do that anymore. But there's nothing, I don't think, to stop you playing around with your deployment and recovery mode and to use that efficiently. And it's interesting. I was thinking about it, assuming that is what they're doing. I'm not sure why we weren't doing it as well. In hindsight, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can't do that, but it just seems like if you can play around with the recovery by not recovering in a straight and not recovering using the turbocharger, why? I also think, well, there must be a scope to not deploy when you don't need to as well.
Well, you're not doing it at Haas. Presumably, suggests that they're not doing it at Ferrari factory team right now.
I would assume so. I don't know, but it was the same at Renault as well. We didn't
okay.
function. So I'm not trying to give away any details of Ferrari or Renault. It's just, in my experience, the engines that I was used to working with didn't have that. We didn't have that option available.
Just on that, Mark, and I may be wide of the mark here, but on the formation lap, when they say to the drivers, lift and coast into turn 12 or whatever, I always assume lift and coast in the old days was to do with fuel saving, but I guess that's a deployment thing as well, is it? That's a harvesting thing?
Mostly it's a cooling thing on the formation lap.
Okay.
So the engine get pretty hot going at slow speed. What you'll do is the driver will push a certain other way around, depending on obviously what the leader's doing. But then towards the end of the lap, you want him to back off and cool the car down, so the car doesn't get too hot while it's sat on the grid. The downside is that the tyres also cool down a bit, which you don't necessarily want. So that's why you do the burnouts coming up to the grid to get the rear tyres back up to temperature. In the race itself, lift and coast is mainly done for tyre temperature to some extent, but car cooling again, and we'll see an awful lot of that in Mexico, because in Mexico, because the air's so thin, you can't actually cool the car enough, full stop, pretty much, and the drivers almost have to do lift and coast all the way through the race to stop the cars overheating, also for the brakes as well.
Wow.
So this is one of, actually, the tyre guys that I've worked with always said that lift and coast didn't help the tyres. But my feeling is that they didn't actually fully understand the effects, because certainly Max is the lift and coast king. And if it wasn't the right thing to do, I don't think he'd be doing it. There is another benefit of lift and coast, which a lot of people don't think about, is when you brake at the highest speed, if you brake from a higher speed, the car will dip more than if you do lift and coast. So if you lift off, the car slows without massively dipping, and then you brake, you don't have to apply as much brake pressure to then do the rest of the braking. And that means you can actually run the front ride height a little bit lower. And also it tends to stabilize the car in the entry a little bit as well. So a lot of the drivers do a little bit of lift and coast to stabilize the cars on the corner entries. So that's another reason for doing it.
And that's what Rob Wilson calls gentle, firm on the brake pedal pressure. You just pull the brakes before you actually apply them.
Yeah.
Which he noticed in Lewis Kovalainen days, how well Lewis was doing that.
Well, now this is an old story, but Hungary 2008, Lewis was on pole. There was a screw up in the garage before the race, and he didn't get all the fuel in the car that he needed to do the race. Lift and coast was something that we did when we were in trouble with fuel in races, but only typically towards the end of a race. And we didn't really, it was only for that, as far as we were concerned. It was just a way of getting your fuel back in. Anyway, he was missing, I think it was like something like 5% of his fuel. It was a big amount. So he had to do lift and coast from the very start of the race. Otherwise he wasn't going to get to the end, because there's no refueling. Sorry, there was refueling, wasn't there, in 2008? So for the first part of the race, he was going to have to do lift and coast. Otherwise, he was going to have to stop too early. So he did that, and his pace was phenomenal. He set off, and he just pulled out a huge lead. And then it got later in the race, and Heikki was struggling. Heikki couldn't match the pace at all. Later in the race, when he got his fuel back on target, he started to push, and he had about 2 quick laps, and then he started going slower than he was before.
I knew that.
And it was very obvious. That was when we twigged that lift and coast cooled your tyres. Basically, it helped your tyre performance. And the next race was Valencia. So actually, this must have been 2009, not 2008. Sorry. The next race was Valencia, and we knew that we were going to have tyre trouble in Valencia. So we targeted doing lift and coast in that race as well. And it worked pretty well for us because our car wasn't as quick as the BAR. It was the Brawn, wasn't it, in 2009? We weren't as quick as them, but I think we were the next car. And
worked.
There was a certain amount of trepidation going into the race. Is this the right thing to do? And afterwards, even people argued, well, maybe we shouldn't have done it. But I was absolutely convinced the only reason we were competitive, or reasonably competitive, was because we were doing it. And that kind of opened our eyes. Those 2 races opened our eyes to the additional benefits of lift and coast. But
speaking of fuel, you mentioned fuel there. How often these days is fuel a consideration in terms of making it to the finish?
I would say, in my experience, generally, you lift and coast for fuel saving. If you have to lift more than 40 or 50 meters going into a corner, that's okay. You can do that, and it doesn't really cost you any lap time. Any more than that, you are starting to give away serious amounts of lap time. So on fueling the cars, we tended not to build significant amounts of lift and coast into the equation, because if we got our fuel consumption wrong, we were having to do large amounts of lift and coast. That was just going to make us very slow. And on top of that, a lot of the time, the front tyre temperatures are actually low relative to the rears, because obviously with the car, you're driving the rear axle with the engine. The rear tyres tend to slide a lot more than the fronts, and so the rear tyres overheat, but the fronts don't necessarily do that. And lift and coast tends to cool the front tyres more than the rears. So if you do too much lift and coast on a track where you're actually struggling to keep your front tyres up to temperature, you then end up even worse off. You're really struggling for front grip as well. So I don't know what other teams do. Other teams may be more aggressive with it, but certainly we tended to only use lift and coast from a fuel point of view as an emergency get out of jail thing.
Right.
But there were some races where we went into races planning lift and coast for tyre saving, brake saving, and then we would fuel the car on the assumption that we were going to do some lift and coast. So it's just not with the intention of starting the race with a lower fuel load. It's with the intention of doing other things, really.
Mark, you mentioned cooling the engine, cooling everything on the formation lap. How long, if you're on the front row, for example, how long can you wait on the grid before things start to get worrisome with temperatures?
Yeah.
Because you've got experience of the days when you went to the front of the pit lane, and sometimes you sat for 3 or 4 minutes with the engine running, right? And you went into you'd reduce the cylinder mode on the engine.
Well, I mean, these days they can actually turn the engines off at the end of the pit lane and wait until you'd normally fire up a minute before we're going to go and go. But yeah, in with the V8s, we got to they were cycling the cylinders firing, so they probably only have 2 cylinders firing when you're waiting. So you could normally wait about 3 minutes. The current cars, if they leave the garage cold, can normally wait about 3 minutes with the engine running, in my experience. On the grid, I mean, if you're on the front row, you are going to be waiting almost a minute to go. But that will be taken, the engine guys and the race engineers will know, or particularly the engine guys will know whereabouts on the lap that you need to start cooling the car down from. Well, they'll have a target temperature to peak at around the formation lap, and they'll advise the race engineer when the driver needs to start cooling his car. So they obviously leave a bit of margin, but it's rare that you're going to be on the grid for more than a minute, even if you're on the front. So yeah, that's about what you're planning for. But it's all planned. I think this is the thing that people don't appreciate, is how much detail goes into the planning for a race. It's absolutely phenomenal, and it's the area that people watching on TV they have no idea what level of planning is involved in running a car at a race. It's incredible how many people and how many little aspects are absolutely crucial. And if you get these wrong, the consequences can be disastrous.
Well, speaking of planning, what went wrong, do you think, with Oscar Piastri's weekend in Austin? Very good racing car, potentially a pole-winning, race-winning car, and yet he was nowhere, and he had that ridiculous shunt in the sprint race. I mean, what a weekend for Piastri. And this in the context of when he had the terrible weekend in Baku. Mark Webber, his manager, good guy, said, well, he's only human, which is fair enough. But for how long can we keep saying he's only human? That's the next question.
Yeah. I mean, he qualified third for sprint qualifying. So that looked like he was on his normal trajectory, where I tend to think he starts the weekend a little bit behind Lando pace, and then he normally picks up, and by qualifying, he's actually often quicker. Certainly a match. But I think the shunt at the start of the sprint race, which in my opinion was his fault, because he pulled a maneuver trying to undertake his teammate that just assumed there was no other cars on the track, which was, given the wide nature of that turn one, was crazy. I suppose the question is, did it dent his confidence a bit? Obviously, the car was damaged, so were they able to put the car back to the same configuration? As we've already talked about, they lost a load of knowledge about the car in the sprint race, but that doesn't account for why he didn't qualify very well for the main event. It's really quite confusing.
Yeah, I mean, 2 races in a row now where he's just been well below par.
And the other thing, I mean, again, this is pure speculation on my part, but as I understand it, the McLaren first started with a high anti-dive front suspension, and then I believe Lando felt that the steering was numb. He didn't like the feel of it, and so they did a slightly reduced anti-dive version for him, which means a bit more of the loading goes through the springs and dampers, but has given him the front feel that he prefers. Whereas Oscar apparently, I gather, didn't actually feel that there was a problem with that. But with Austin being bumpy, was that lack of feel from the front of the car more of a problem for Oscar than it was for Lando? And did that somehow contribute to both a bit more understeer than he should have had in qualifying, and then his front tyres potentially giving up more than than Lando's in the race? I get pure speculation on my part, and McLaren they won't want to talk about it, but if they might say, well, the difference is actually minimal, and actually maybe there's even an aero benefit for one or the other. I don't know. So, because that's the other thing, that the fact they run that massive amount of anti-dive, people have said, it's to keep the car flat on entry. Well, the fronts of these cars barely move anyway. Yeah. So I think the more likely reason why they've got those wishbone angles that they've got is for aero, for the flow downwind of the front suspension to the floor. Because if you want to keep the car flat, it's the rear that makes the difference. The rear moves around a lot more than the front of the car. So I'm a bit unconvinced about that you would want maximum anti-dive to stop the front of the car pitching, because they're so stiff, they hardly move anyway. In most of the movement at the front of the car is from the tyres. The tyres squashing. Anyway,
not much time for McLaren to think about that as they move on to Mexico with everybody else.
Well, and Mexico, curbs. That is the story of Mexico. And a car with lots of anti-dive isn't necessarily what you want. And ironically, the McLaren used to be the absolute best car over the curbs in Mexico previous years. I remember watching Lando in practice or the race 2 years ago. It was like the car was a magic carpet. He could do stuff over curbs that no one else was able to do. So it'd be very interesting to see if they've given that up in the quest for aero performance, which they may have done.
How do you see Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren in the curbs battle?
I think they're probably much of a muchness these days. I think it used to be that the McLaren stood out as being fantastic, and everyone else sort of struggled a bit. So it comes down to how well your car is balanced and how much downforce and efficiency you've got. If you've got more than someone else, you can afford to soften the car off a little bit,
right,
and be another step better by being able to ride the curbs and taking tighter lines across the curbs. So it'll come down to that. And obviously, based on what we're seeing at the moment, is the Red Bulls in the best position for that, I would say. I think Austin also suggested that the Mercedes is a car that isn't great in high speed, because although George was second in the sprint race itself, I think that was only because of where he ended up on the track, and he had a clear track ahead of him because Max went away. So I don't think the Mercedes was actually that brilliant a car. So it suggests that car was very good in Singapore, very good at low-speed corners, but not great at the high-speed, low-speed combination. Maybe not great over bumps, ? But Singapore, there are curbs, so maybe in Mexico it'll be decent on the curbs, and there's more low-speed content in Mexico, so the Mercedes might be a bit better, potentially. But there are some high-speed corners in Mexico in that the back sector 2. So you might.
I was going to say that in general, the wing's less effective, relatively speaking, and I guess that's going to be a really interesting bit of the track, right? Those high-speed S's.
They're really important.
Right through there, I'm sure, but
yeah.
It'll be fascinating to see, say, I don't know, Antonelli through there, for example.
Yep.
Never seems that comfortable on quick corners, and indeed how good the McLarens are relative to the Red Bulls.
Yeah, it's a very important section of the track. You can get either the high speed or the low speed good, but getting both correct is the key to it. And also there's a bit of driving line through there as well. You have to know where to give up, because the corners tend to slow down. You have to know where to give up a little bit of pace so you don't enter the next one too fast. When we ran Ollie in P1 in when was that? Was that 23? He was very, very good in the low speed. Actually, was quicker than Nico in P1, but Nico had him for breakfast in that far sector because Nico knew how to drive the car through that sector. So yeah, I'm sure Ollie's learned now.
The last sector, that all that twiddly bit in the stadium, it's interesting because if there was a straight directly after that, you would say it was critically important, but the sort of the slowish mediums, I don't know if that's medium speed, you're just accelerating coming out through the old Pirotella corner there. It kind of nullifies, I would guess, how you go through the stadium section. I would have thought you could afford to give up a little bit of grip there and not lose anything in terms of top speed or getting to terminal velocity, or would I be wrong?
Well, you need to get onto that long right-hander a good pace, and that means you have to come out of the previous right-hander well. And to come out of that one well, you need to come through the hairpin well. And to get through the hairpin well, you need to have come through the high-speed corner into the stadium well. So it's quite a technical sector. And again, it's going to a car that has good low-speed rotation with good rear stability is going to be a car that works well through there.
What? Riskability?
Rear stability, sorry.
Oh, rear stability, sorry, You said riskability, that's a new one. That would be quite a good one, actually, wouldn't it? I could take a bit of risk with this. Replacing the word chuckability, I suppose.
Yeah. But I think maybe the Mercedes might be quite good through that little bit, because that's a bit Singapore-like in a way. So it's an important sector, and it was somewhere that when we had, I think it was with Nico and Carlos at Renault, Carlos was very good in that sector, and Nico was struggling a little bit, complained of too much understeer in the hairpin, and was tending to push on a bit too much. So it's a really technical section, that little one, and it does. Then your speed onto the straight comes out of that sequence to some extent. So you can lose a tenth there easily. And a tenth isn't a huge amount, but when the qualifying is as close as it can be make or break. So it's a very technical circuit, actually. I don't think it's not the best circuit in terms of it's a bit, when you watch it as a spectator, it's a little bit Mickey Mouse in some ways, the nature of it. But in terms of an engineering challenge, it's a big one, I would say. In terms of, because of the air density, you're running your maximum downforce level, but you've got less downforce than Monza because the ambient pressure is 20 to 25% lower. So obviously the drag, that means the drag is very low as well. So the straight line speeds are phenomenal. And on top of all of that, you can't cool the car properly. You can't cool the brakes and you can't cool the engine properly because the air's so thin. So
who'd want to be a Formula One engineer in Mexico?
It's a great challenge. Yeah.
Mark, can't let you go without talking about Ferrari. Fabulous drive by Charles Leclerc. And you kind of predicted that, with the wind change there was. It gave him a little bit more front end, it would appear.
Yeah.
And really driving well. But obviously the mediums didn't stand up to it at the end. But on the counterpoint, you would have imagined that Lewis would have got more out of his tires in the last phase of the race, but it was strange how he faded away, right?
It was, yeah. I don't really have an explanation for that. I think it just shows that he's still not as comfortable with the car as you'd hope he would be. Obviously, he finished the race on the soft, on the medium. I didn't look at how he brought those tyres in. Don't know whether he maybe pushed the tyres a bit too hard early on, but it just seemed that, he just didn't quite have the pace. He started the weekend slightly quicker than Charles, didn't he? And then come actual race qualifying, he was just pipped by Charles, who was getting his act together. And then in the race, I mean, he was... The reason I was annoyed about Ferrari not stopping Charles a lap earlier.
Well, we'll just explain that, because we got on this on the Zoom call. But when he got finally passed by Lando, I guess you're thinking golden rule, bring the guy in straight away, right?
Well, it just seemed he was really struggling. Charles was really struggling, and on top of that, Lewis was right behind him. And they started fighting. So it hurt both Charles and Lewis.
Yeah.
The fact that Charles hadn't come in a lap earlier. So I just didn't really understand why they didn't bring... I guess they were worried about how far he was going to have to go on the medium at the end. But the fact is that they must have cost both drivers at least a second with that, possibly more. So that just seemed like... not a great choice at that point, and that would have hurt Lewis a little bit. But it doesn't explain his pace later in the race. I think he's just ultimately not as happy with the car.
On the assumption that the Ferrari doesn't have as much efficient downforce natively as a McLaren now or a Red Bull.
Yeah.
But based on how they went in Austin, how do you think they'll go in Mexico? Will the thin air and the curbs help them a little bit, or will it hurt them?
It's difficult to say. I'm not really sure. I think the curb thing might hurt them. I think, as I said, the most efficient car will be better off because you can afford to run it a bit softer. We'll have to see. I mean, there's still a mix of high speed and low speed, which they seem to be slightly better off with in Austin than Mercedes were, arguably. We'll see. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a big difference. I think it all just says really, I suspect that we'll see Max fastest and the McLaren's next quickest again, and the rest following on. And maybe this time Mercedes the nearest challenger rather than Ferrari, potentially. We'll see. Maybe someone else will be quicker. Maybe see the Williams is looking better. They had a terrible weekend, but I think that car's got some potential. And also Carlos has a very special line at turn 2 in Mexico. He can place his car very well over the apex curb and gain time there without, and this is the critical bit, without going inside the track limits. He's got a very fine judgment just there. Our guys tried it and they were either too far inside the curb and got track limits, or they were too far outside the curb and it upset the car too much. And I think even last year, Charles Leclerc was trying to do the same as Carlos, and he couldn't replicate it, and he gave up. So it'd be interesting to see if Carlos is still able to use that trick at that corner again.
Yeah. Was he doing that in the Renault days?
Yes, I think he was. Certainly in the McLaren days, and certainly in the Ferrari days. But he's got turn 2. He's just got he's got it spot on, and he can do it lap after lap after lap. And Kev just said he could tell that there was a line there, but he said it was just too difficult to consistently do it, and the risk of either getting a track limit excursion, which obviously in qualifying means you lose your time, or hitting the curb too hard was just too great, and he just wasn't confident enough to go for it every lap. Whereas Carlos seemed to have the knack.
And just to be clear, that's basically the apex of the second part of the first chicane, right?
Yeah, so the left-hander.
Yeah.
He can just place his inside wheel just precisely where he needs to carry a bit more speed over that curb. And it helps his exit through the next right-hander, because he just can enter the right-hander slightly wider than everyone else manages, and it just gives him, he's particularly quick through turns 2 and 3. So it'd be interesting to see if he can still do that.
Well, I guess he won't be thanking Mark Slade for revealing all his secrets now, but we'll put him out there.
I think everyone can see it. If you look at all the onboards, you can see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's only relatively recently that the general public have had access to all the onboards.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's
the drivers have always had that for quite a long time, and we could see it, and we could show our drivers it. And as I said, Kev just looked at him. Well, I actually can't do that. I'm just
Good on him.
Yeah.
I guess the other factor is whether or not they're going to change the curbs at all, or they have changed the curbs at all over the last 12 months, which they tend to do without telling anybody. Well, they tell some people, but not us.
Well, and sometimes you used to get it in the pre-race notes from the race director's race notes, and then you find out what they'd done wasn't actually what it said in the notes as well. I'd say that was more often to do with the resurfacing than it was with the curbs, to be fair. Which is why the drivers normally go out and have a look before the weekend starts as to where the curbs are. Something that Kimi never did, though.
Kimi wasn't fond of wandering around the circuit on a Thursday afternoon, was he?
He did it in 2013. So I can't remember, from McLaren days through to Lotus days. He very quickly gave up on the track walk, but for some reason he was in Montreal. He was bored. And we were going out for the track walk, but without him normally. And he just said, "Oh, I'll come." And we were like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll come." And then we got about halfway around, and he said, "I'm never doing this again."
Anyone got a mobile phone? I need a lift back.
Yeah. Another time with Mika, we got about halfway around, and there was a car going round, and he flagged it down and got in. So I'm bored of this.
The professionalism, the dedication of them all.
Yeah.
Wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, it caught Kimi out in Brazil in 2012. Remember, he went off the left-hander leading up the hill in Brazil. He went off and went down an escape road, and he thought that the gate would be open and he'd be able to go back onto the track behind the barrier. It turned out the gate was closed, and he had to do a U-turn and come back out the way he'd come in and go back up the hill the wrong way. Yeah, it was that was a bit of a mess. And maybe if he'd done the track walk, we'd just seen that gate was closed. But anyway,
I gave Daniel Ricciardo a hard time on air. I can't remember what year it was, but it was off the line in Melbourne, and I think he went off to the right on the grass and hit some sort of dip.
Right.
Damage. I don't know if it's a big shunt, but he damaged the car enough not to race.
Yeah,
he was out of the race. And I remember saying then, what is the point of these track walks if they don't do things like that and look at all the bits on the edge of the track where potentially they might be putting a wheel?
Yeah, I agree. In my opinion, track walk with the race engineers and everything, the whole entourage is a bit of a
cameraman and everything else.
Yeah, because I always found it was quite detrimental to actually explaining what you needed to explain. you need to sit down in an office to do that. But I think the smart drivers go out on a bike and look at it themselves, potentially with either their trainer or their race engineer, just to look at the actual circuit and not talk about the other stuff. So that would be my preference, that they should have a look, basically. But
Mark, I was going to say, as ever, great pleasure having you. Thank you for your time and your insight.
No problem.
We'll be watching for Carlos Sainz turn 2. I mean, is there anything else to be looking at now? This is just brilliant.
That's the one I'd look at. The other one is just in the high-speed section. I think it's turns 9 and 10. The sequence, how they ride the curbs through there is really important, because if you hit I think it was turn 9 apex curve, you hit that too hard, it'll push you wide out turn 10. So that's where that sequence is technically really challenging, and just doing that just right to get the best exit onto that short straight before the right-hander into the stadium is critical.
Yeah. But dare I say, is that not where Carlos Sainz had a big shunt?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I think he did. Just exactly what you described. So, give and take, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Mark. And we'll be back again to talk over the weekend, the Mexican Grand Prix weekend. We're getting your insight too. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. It's great.
Well, there we go. The brilliant Mark Slade. Wonderful to see him and to have that chat. I love those stories about Kimi and Mika on the track walks, getting a lift home halfway through. Yeah, doesn't surprise me at all. I imagine Calle Rovanperä will be pretty similar when he's in Formula One as well. But big thanks to Mark. Superb analysis and preview for Mexico. I'll be looking out for Carlos Sainz at turn 2 on that curb. And what about Max and the way he uses the tyres for the lift and coast? I mean, and I think in a previous chat we had with Mark, he said something like, when it comes to time management, Max is the gold standard. So as much as one can glibly say, well, the Red Bull's really good now, Max Verstappen's a very, very good driver and he's making the most of it. It's all those tiny details that add up as to why Max is so good. And you really only get an insight into those when you talk to somebody with the experience and understanding of Mark Slade. Just wonderful. And all that stuff about, the green deploy button, it sort of comes over on the radio and we think, well, it's just deploying this or doing that. But when you think about it and what they're actually doing, I mean, they could well be the only team doing that. They may well be. Just wonderful. So, yeah, big thanks again to Mark. Great to see that. You probably see a bit of reflection on my face now. That's because I'm in the bunker. No, I'm not in a bunker, but I'm because the pop-out chat that I normally like to use where your question comes up on screen, for some extraordinary reason, in Chrome isn't working today. I'm just going to go through the chat as it appears in the normal YouTube form. So I've got my iPad here, as you can see. And we got a super chat in straight away from Adam Dovix. Thank you very much, Adam. Says, I'm just going to read them out. Hi, Peter. Not sure why Mercedes performance fluctuations are barely mentioned. Not like Ferrari, but best Mercedes went from P4 to P6 at the Grand Prix. When they win, George's praise to the highest. Best wishes. Well, yeah, we kind of touched on that. Well, we more than touched on that in the chat just then with Mark Slade. And yeah, very, very, well, what can you say? Inconsistent performance by Mercedes going from Singapore to Austin. Mark thinks they'll, as you heard, hopefully they'll do okay in Mexico. They should be pretty good over the curbs, probably better than Ferrari. So, and curbs are really important there, assuming they haven't changed everything since last year, which is always a big assumption. Then Mercedes should be kind of back in the ballpark. But you're right, there's a lot of, I mean, it says a lot, I suppose, for Mercedes' PR wagon, doesn't it? That they're a media wagon, that whenever they have a bad weekend, nobody seems to get very particularly critical of them. And when things go well, it's all rah, rah, rah. But certainly we've been talking about it on this channel, about Mercedes and their inconsistencies. So anyway, I'll do my normal thing, go back to the front, the top rather, which is kind of the fairest way of doing this. This is from Alwyn Kruger, I guess, from South Africa. Indeed, which was your favourite South African race? Well, all at Kyalami, obviously, and I knew the old Kyalami, the original one, with the Kyalami Ranch just down below it, and I raced with Williams, of course, in the new one. But my all-time favourite South African Grand Prix would have to be 81, when Carlos Reutemann won by choosing slicks on the grid and getting through the early wet phase of the race, then to win a great victory. It was a wonderful win for Carlos, 81, South Africa, one of his best wins. And ironically, the points were then taken away from him a couple of months later. Bernie Ecclestone having shaken hands with Carlos on the grid, confirming that it would be a point-scoring race. There was a lot of political unrest at the time in Formula One, and the points were taken away. So he lost those 9 points, and then he lost the World Championship that year by 1 point. So, make of that what you will. Oh, and the winner of the World Championship was Bernie's driver, Nelson Piquet. I suppose we should add that on as well. So, yeah, that still rankles, obviously. Next question, A2612. I see some Sir Lewis fans are still seething about Abu Dhabi 21. It's probably just looking through the chat. I think a lot of non-Lewis fans are as well. I mean, it was not a great thing. It was a poor decision made at the wrong time, and as a result, Michael Massey lost his job, and there's no way in the world they should ever have restarted that race until all the cars that had been lapped had unlapped themselves, and that is very clear in the sporting regulations, and Mercedes played it by that rule. And because they suddenly got into this thing about it's the last race and it's the championship decider, it can't be finished behind a safety car or some such rubbish, and we've had a lot of races finishing behind the safety car since then, got to say. They changed the rules mid-sentence, and as we know, Max won it. So yeah, I still think it was a massive miscarriage of justice, that one. And I don't think Mercedes did a good enough job following it through and fighting it in the courts all the way. They should have done that. I keep pressing this as if it's going to appear, but it's not. The next one is Marcellus TKW. Hi, Peter. With the Red Bull and Racing Bulls driver announcement coming up, and the not sure. It says Z. Nothing more has happened there. I think we've kind of had those announcements, haven't we? Oh, I suppose the Racing Bulls one haven't. Oh, and of course Yuki. Yeah, okay. I would guess it's going to be Zak Hadjar in the second A team, and Yuki, if there's money from Honda for a Ford-powered car, which I doubt, will be going back to the B team. Will they keep Liam? Or yes, I guess they will. I mean, he's fairly Red Bullish in the way he behaves out of the car. Hasn't really delivered, I don't think, as much as he could have in the B team compared with Isaac Hadjar. But he's very quick in terms of his car control and his ability to get a lot out of a new set of tyres for one lap. He's very good, but his corners go on very long, and he doesn't have any margin for error, and his way of being quick is to brake late, get the power on soon, and the minute the variables change, that's when it catches you out. So unless he starts to go to short corners and really starts to refine his driving, he's always going to be sort of lost in that area, I think. Whereas Carlos Sainz is still of that ilk, but has softened everything and has come back on everything and now focuses on what he does really well. And that is definitely attainable for Liam Lawson. What Carlos Sainz has done is a role model for how Liam Lawson needs to progress, in my opinion. Kali Hassan 2004. Hi, Peter. I started watching in 2022. Promise I didn't come from the Netflix show. Well, you don't have to make that promise. I got nothing against it. It's just that I never really watch it, and I'm just assuming it's sort of fairly lightweight stuff. I've learned an insane amount about the sport from your videos. Oh, well, thank you very much. I wonder what was coming next, actually. Now I can't miss any race or your qualifying analysis. Well, thank you very much. It's very kind. I'm only really as informed as the people that I'm lucky enough to know. People like Mark Slade, and in my past, obviously, a lot of very good engineers, drivers, and mechanics that I've known over the years. And it's big thanks to all of those guys that spent time talking to the likes of me. Paulid 111. Mike Thackful was seen at this year's Goodwood. Why did he not get a good chance in Formula One? Well, I think he got quite a good chance, didn't he, with Tyrrell? I remember playing tennis with him. We were quite good mates at one point, and we fell out over something. Can't remember what it was. But I was playing tennis with him in near my house, tiny flat in Beaconsfield, where Karoon now lives, I think, in that town. Anyway, that's a completely separate subject. And we were chatting away, and I think we came to the conclusion that if he managed to race in Canada, he would be the youngest driver ever to start a Grand Prix at that point. And so I rang Ken Tyrrell next day, who I knew pretty well. I said, "Oh, what do you think about this, Ken?" He said, "Oh, that's a good idea." I put him in the car. Couldn't believe it. Peter Windsor's first management deal. But so he had that good start, and he had a very good Formula 2 team, Ralph Honda and everything. So I think if from my experience, he's a very difficult guy. I fell out with him. I haven't fallen out with that many people, but for some reason, he stopped talking to me. He found something that he didn't like about me, and that was it. And I presume that kind of affected And he had that big shunt as well, didn't he, at Thruxton, which might have affected things as well. But I found him a difficult guy, is all I can say. So maybe that translated into his Grand Prix career. Oro 5160 says, who taught Mansell to drive as good as he did? Did he have any family background in motorsport? No, he didn't. He didn't have any family background. His mum was very strong personality, very competitive, lovely lady. His dad was quiet, but a fighter and played his role in World War II as a desert rat. And Nigel, when I met him, was just an all-round Superman already, and he was pretty young by then. He was super fit, punching a boxing punch bag every day in the gym, going for long runs. He was very good at judo at that point, and he'd taken up karting at a young age because it was, competitive and he wanted to win. And I saw him first drive in 1978 in Formula 3, and to me, having watched Jim Clark, having watched Carlos Reutemann and several others at that point, he was absolutely a Carlos clone, a Jim Clark clone, really, in terms of the way he was able to get into the corner early, his incredible finesse at trading off brakes against lateral load, his use of the pedal steering, obviously the gear changing as well, superb. And I was just captivated by this amazing talent that was very clear to see. And it never changed. It was all natural. Of course he developed it, and of course he progressed with road dust, with experience. All those things come on top of you. But that natural talent was there from day one. So there's no analysis of how and why he got that. He was just incredibly good. Very good golfer at that point as well. And he got his private pilot's license in some ludicrous thing, 13 hours or something. I think it was 14 hours. Everything he did, he just adapted really well. Intelligent, sharp, very, very coordinated, and very, very soft touch. Contrary to his handshake, which was like a vice, and contrary to his personality, which was overpowering for many people, which I quite liked because it just showed his enormous self-belief in him, in his own psyche and what he could do and what he could achieve. And that stood him in good stead as well. But above all, this beautiful soft touch that he was always able to display, even in an uncompetitive car in the wet or in difficult conditions, he was always there. And he didn't really have a decent Grand Prix car till the back end of 85. And from that moment, he was, right up there with the greatest in the sport. But until the back end of 85, he was never in a race-winning car, or a competitive car, really. And so he had a tough Formula One first innings, if you like, but the second part was just wonderful. Yeah, great guy, great friend even today, and still a wonderful golfer today. I mean, with all the injuries he's had and everything else, he can still go round under par. Amazing. Keep doing this as if I'm going to do something with it. Stop putting your finger on the screen. It is an iPad, though. It's inviting, isn't it? Quentin Hirschfield 9382. Other question, Peter. What is a performance from a driver of any era that is not talked about anymore but should, in your opinion? Well, that's a leading question, isn't it? Of so many depths. You've got a singular thing there, a performance from a driver. I think Pedro Rodriguez. I'm only, to some extent, the Rodriguez brothers are in my mind because of the Mexican Grand Prix this weekend. But if you look at some of Pedro's drives in the wet, particularly in '68 French Grand Prix, Longford '68 as well, how good he was in the wet in a relatively uncompetitive BRM. I think those drives were never really given the credit they should have got. I think that's one thing I would say. Pedro Rodriguez in the wet. I was obviously a kid reading about those races then, but I don't remember the journalists at the time saying how good Pedro was. And he clearly was. I mean, we saw that in the Porsche 917s when he was alongside guys like Joe Siffert, and he was right up there. The best wet weather driver there, but I think he was very, very good. So that's one thing I would say was underrated. I would say Vic Elford is another driver that I don't think has ever been given the credit that he should have got for everything that he did. A very unsatisfactory Formula One career. Started with Cooper BRM in '68 uncompetitive car, and then went to Colin Crabb, lovely guy, bless him, that he bought this McLaren, that Cooper, and then McLaren that Vic raced very well. But he was never really given an opportunity with a factory team, and he should have been. He was that good, I think. And if you look at what he achieved in 68, we talk about the Triple Crown and this and that. Think about this. 68, Vic Elford began his year by winning the Monte Carlo Rally in a Porsche 911. Then he went to Daytona and won Daytona 24 hours in a Longtail 908. Then he won the Targa Florio for Porsche. And then he made his Formula One debut at the French Grand Prix in the wet in a very uncompetitive Cooper BRM, which he'd never tested, and finished fourth. And then it all stopped. I think that's one of the great careers that we should be talking about. And Formula One should be hanging their head in shame and thinking, why did we let this guy go? So there we go. Sarosh Showman, a regular. Thank you very much, Sarosh. Sarosh Soman, yeah. Peter, I do feel quite sad for Pierre Gasly. Since he's stuck with Alpine, I don't see the team becoming competitive at all. Well, you don't have much faith in them, do you? Well, I mean, the big hope at Alpine, of course, was that the whole Ollie Oakes thing would have gone through and he had bought the team and started running it properly. And I say properly, I mean, there's some good people there, obviously, in the management side, left over from the better years at Renault and Benetton. But in terms of the depth of the team and where it's going and the direction of it, it's obviously messy there and very, very hard to see how they're going to progress. I mean, I don't know what Flavio's doing, but I think the old magic of, of getting Michael Schumacher into a Benetton and winning a championship, and then when he goes off to Ferrari, getting Fernando to effectively be the next Michael, that kind of all gone away now. It's not quite the same, is it? And I'm not impressed by the way they've treated Jack Doohan. Whether you're a Doohan fan or not, it is incorrect to do what they did. And then just to put Colapinto in the car, who's not really doing a brilliant job. He's not doing the job that, say, we're seeing from other young rookies in other teams, let's put it that way, without being too specific. Yeah, he's doing okay. There are moments when he's quicker than Pierre. But, I mean, if he's supposed to be this brilliant young superstar, he should be, 40% of the time quicker than the other driver. That's what Jackie Stewart was to Graham Hill in 65 in his first season in Formula One. He's got to be there, but he makes a lot of mistakes and he's got very, very wide turn in still. I mean, he's more on the edge than Liam Lawson all the time. Anyway, putting that to one side, the only hope is if they do get bought out by some new lot and properly converted. Maybe somebody like Christian Horner would see that as an opportunity to go in and do something. Christian's got a very good brain like that. I mean, the first thing he did when he got to Red Bull was get Adrian Newey. So if Adrian's not available, it doesn't make it as easy then, because once you've got Adrian, you can do a team. Anybody really could do a Formula One team. If Adrian Newey wants to bring his guys and he's there, it's not that difficult to put a great operation around it. I'm being facetious in a way, obviously, because it is difficult. There are a million factors, but you see what I mean. You've got the heart of the team sorted, and that's what Christian did from day one. All credit to him. But if he did another team now, Alpine, and Christian's and Adrian's not available, and nor is Rob Marshall, and nor is Pete Prod, and nor of any of the people that he used to work with, and he's got to do it from scratch, that's a completely different thing. That's, well, where do we go from here? Because the bottom line ultimately is they need a quick car. There's nothing to beat having a quick car. It's amazing how a poorly run Formula One team can suddenly get itself together if it's got a quick car. So that's all it's about. So if Christian is thinking of doing a Formula One team of his own, he's got to be thinking of what engineers he's going to have and how good a car that's going to be. Budget, yes, but I think from Christian's point of view, budget's probably not that much of an issue. A, he's got a lot of his own money, and B, he's got a reputation which people presumably would support and pour money into. Same with engines and stuff. So he could do it, and he could do that at Alpine. But again, I raised my question hand, and that is, what would be the engineering strength of that team if he or anybody else did it? That's the only way Alpine are going to develop, I think. So Emu Warrior says, "G'day from Melbourne." G'day, Emu. Hope you're enjoying the show, and hope things are good in Melbourne. Good opening one-day international for Australia against India in Perth. I guess you'll be getting some in Melbourne soon. And then you got the Ashes coming up. That's good. SBASAM. Peter, You have my favourite show on Formula One. I love the insights. Have you ever thought about having Claude Roel from Optimum G? No, I haven't. That's a good idea. Thanks. Yeah, he used to be with Reynard, I think, Claude, didn't he? Good man. Yeah, good. Very top guy. Good technical guy. Yeah, he'd be another good bloke. I'm just so pleased with the. I mean, my thought with Mark Slade was that he's going to give us a different view of Formula One. He's going to give us a race engineer's view of Formula One from the pit wall, and he's doing exactly that. And it's a view that I think we very rarely get, regardless of what platform you watch. I mean, it's quite something to listen to the way Mark analyzes a race and the drivers and the way the drivers are managed and the tires and the strategies, and it's wonderful. But yeah, the more views we can get, and don't forget, we're still very keen on Scarbs as well. And when we get the new cars coming in 26, we'll be having Scarbs back on the show very quickly to do some analysis. Rao5160 says, personally, I believe Mansell was Senna Prost level. Oh yeah, no doubt about that at all. He's a short corner driver like Prost, but took it a level higher, because Prost from 84 onwards was pretty much in the Lauda mode of, I'm going to finish every race, and the more races I finish, the more races I'm going to win, and championships I'm going to win. And that's why his pole record was not great. But he was a very quick single lap driver prior to 84. Very, very quick. But he changed and he developed it and he honed his talent in an extremely refined way. And that was when Nigel started racing against him, in effect, back end of 85, as I say. And Nigel was definitely quicker than Prost, in my opinion. And I think he was as quick, if not quicker than Senna in some areas. Very different sort of driver, short corner driver. Senna, the absolute epitome of a longer corner driver, sort of George Russell style, but with fewer spikes than George has. Even better probably on time management than George is today. And so you had those two extremes. But yeah, Nigel right up there with them, no doubt about that. Jack Bauer 8460, hi Peter, can't understand how Yuki is qualifying badly and having such an average pace when Max is taking pole and winning. If the car is the second fastest, or is it, shouldn't he be in the top 5? Well, he should. Absolutely, he should. And it's a good point. And he's not. And that's to his, to his shame, really, because this is the one opportunity of Yuki Tsunoda's life. And the trouble is, he's going into that car, into that team, with all the things that have always worked for him, which is basically long corners, a little bit of shadow boxing going into quick corners just to be ready for the slide, fearless driving, late braking, power on soon. And the Red Bull is a very edgy car. As good as Max makes it look, the RB21 is not as good as a McLaren. It doesn't have as big a sweet spot in terms of its efficient aerodynamics, and therefore they have to run on the limit of ride height, wing setting, whatever it is, just to get the best from the car. Max can do that. But for Yuki Tsunoda, the car's much too edgy for Yuki Tsunoda to drive the way he wants to drive it. And because he's never spent any time in his career starting to drive the way Max drives, even though he's had plenty of opportunity to do that, because he's been a Red Bull driver for a long time now, he's taking the wrong, he's driving the car the wrong way, in my opinion, and he'll never ever do any better as a result. And it's a great shame, because he's got a lot of talent. I don't say that in a patronizing way. I say that in a real way. I think he's got a real core of natural talent there, but he's never allowed that to develop in the right direction. His concept of progressing as a driver, I think, is related to physical fitness and to sim and doing what he does on the sim with the engineers, none of which is ever going to help him become anywhere near Max Verstappen's style. And that doesn't apply just to Yuki. It applies to a lot of drivers out on the grid there. They've got this blind spot about progressing and changing their style. It's like, I'm a Formula One racing driver. Nobody can teach me how to do it. I'm the boss of the car. Let's get the car to suit me, and then I'll be quick. It's that sort of attitude, which is, of course, completely and utterly wrong and leads you down paths of the type we now see Yuki Tsunoda walking. Truth Kip. Hi, Peter. Do you think Lewis is lacking execution in qualifying? His last Austin Q3 sector 2 was underwhelming, but he was faster than Charles in sectors 1 and 2. It cost him P2. Why is that so? Well, I think in the case of Ferrari, it was impossible to get 3 good sectors out of that car in terms of the tyres. And I don't think they thought it through in terms of, in that case, I'm going to focus on sector 1 or I'm going to focus on sector 3. I think both drivers just went for it in the way they drive. And Charles, as you say, was better in a couple of areas. Lewis was very good in sector 1 through those quick S's. And I would assume that he would have been told or would have thought it through beforehand. If I'm going to load the tyres up that much in sector 1, I'm going to have to pay a penalty somewhere else. And did he think that through? I don't know. I think there's more time to be gained in sector 2 in Austin than in sector 1, because slow corners are where you lose time. You don't gain time in slow corners, you lose them in slow corners. And the straight is the straight, And so for me, the way Charles did the lap was a more logical way. But of course, Max, I'm not saying, of course, he's not in a Ferrari, but I don't think the car was as good as a McLaren, as I keep saying, although McLaren probably could have run a bit lower. I think in Max's case, he thought, right, I'm going to just try to get the best from all 3 sectors. And he did. He compromised a little bit there. He compromised a little bit in sector 1 in order to be good through sectors 2 and 3. Very impressive. Very impressive. As I showed when I did those stats, comparing them through turns 2, 3, 4 and 5. So yeah, I think with Lewis, it was more sort of native feel. And he just, he was very, very good. He was really quick, 3, 4 and 5. As a driver, he was phenomenal. But then, technically, sector 2, it wasn't great. So completely lawless is the next one. Where do you think Horner ends up? Will he find a new team who is on that short list? Well, we just talked about that. The logical thing for him, if I was Horner, would be to try to put together a deal to buy Renault and to go racing as, Arden? But I don't know. As I said, it depends on whether he thinks he's got a new Adrian Newey in his back pocket, or indeed whether he's got Adrian Newey. Who knows? Maybe they've done a deal for Adrian to leave Aston after 1 year or something. I very much doubt it, because why did Adrian go to Aston? Presumably because there's a massive amount of money there for him and for the operation of the team. And everything else is looking good, isn't it? You've got the Honda engine, you've got Andy Cowell, you've got all the things that Adrian would think, wow, this is what I need. Whereas Christian would be starting from scratch, and I just can't see Adrian going there. So who would he get then? That's the next question. Maybe somebody from, maybe I don't know, anybody, whoever's at the background at Racing Bulls, maybe. Kali Hassan, 2004. In my opinion, people overrated Oscar too much. On a good day, he's better than Norris, but I wouldn't say he's any better than Norris. To me, the top 3 clearly are Max, Charles, and George. Not Lewis. That's interesting. Lewis doesn't even get a look in now. Well, yeah, it depends on what people have been saying and doing. All I've been saying is, if you've got Lando Norris, you don't need Oscar Piastri in the other car. He's very, very quick. I've never said he's much quicker than Lando Norris. And equally, I've said, if you've got Oscar Piastri, you don't need Lando Norris in the other car. You need somebody who's not going to distract so much from him. That's all I've ever said. Oscar Piastri is a better driver than Daniel Ricciardo was in his last year at McLaren. That's what I've said. As for other people, I can't speak for them, obviously, but that's how good I think Oscar is. I think in his own right, he's right up there, and he will be in the future. He's very, very good. And I think he does have the ability to learn. I've just been giving Liam Lawson and Yuki a hard time for not progressing as drivers in terms of the way they put a corner together. But I think Oscar is able to learn, and I think he is able to progress. It's just that he's in the vortex of the championship in which he finds himself at the moment. He can't come up for air enough to start thinking about freaking around with his style. So that's not going to happen this year. But I do think he's good. But yeah, is he up there with Lewis? Is he up there with Max and Charles? Definitely not. And I've never said he was. Is he up there with George? Definitely not. And I've never said he was either. So, I don't really, that question for me doesn't Anyway, it's your opinion, but thanks for expressing that. It's very good. Marcellus TKW. Hi, Peter. Who of Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson would you put in the Racing Bulls car alongside Arvin Lidblad for 26? I'm assuming Hajar will pair up with Verstappen. So out of Arvid or... I can't really answer that question because I don't know how Arvid drives. I have to confess that. It's a bad confession to have to make. But I have no idea whether he's short, long, spiky, reflexy, car control-y, or Alan Prosty. I've no idea. So I can't answer the question. Of the two, I would say most likely is going to be Liam because they're going to be with Ford engines and Yuki's basically a Honda guy, isn't he? Isn't Yuki going to end up as a third driver at Aston Martin or something like that? I would imagine. I don't know. Depends if he keeps his Honda deal, I guess. So sorry, I can't be more specific about that one, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to wing it. I don't know. I don't know anything about Arvid Lidblad, so, there we go. Okay, next one. From Sarosh Soman again. Peter, I would say that Max, Leclerc and Russell are currently the best in tire management. Your views, please. I would say Max by a mile. I would agree with Mark Slade on that. And then I think because Leclerc is a very, very good short corner driver, yes, definitely, because when you're a short corner driver, you've naturally got to have the car square whenever possible, or as near square as you can get it for change of direction, and you're naturally creating a bigger sweet spot around which to manipulate the car. So, and you're not right on the edge of a wide turn in trying to get the throttle on as soon as possible. Those things are all tough on tire management. But yes, George is very, very good on tire management as well, particularly considering the way he drives. He's a long corner driver. So yeah, George is outstandingly good there. But I wouldn't have said he's in Max's class in terms of tire management, lap for lap, circuit for circuit, compound for compound. But he is good, very good. And we shouldn't forget Mark says Lewis is as well. And I'd agree with that. I think Lewis is very good, very supple, and very able to feel and manage the tires in a way that, say, Lando and Oscar probably aren't. I'm talking about Lewis compared with them now. Sarosh says again, Peter, how was Leclerc able to manage the tire and still defend for so long against a McLaren in capital letters? Yeah, well, that just shows how good Leclerc is for a start. Secondly, how much Lando messed up that race, really. I mean, I know Lando people will say, oh, he finished second, he eventually got there, he was never going to beat Max, all the things they might want to say. But I think he's in a race-winning car, or he could have taken the race to Max very closely. And it took him a long time to get, much longer than it should have, to get Leclerc. And I think one of the things that helped Charles, as Mark and I chatted about, was when the graining affected the McLaren on the left front relatively early in the race, and Oscar's as well, which was a function of their not running in the sprint race and having enough data to be able to, for the driver to know this wasn't a problem. I mean, they were on the case in terms of the radio saying, don't worry, you're okay, this is a rear limited circuit straight away, which was the correct information, obviously. But I think that cost a bit of momentum for Lando. And then I think he went too quickly on the tyres after his pit stop on the soft tyre. And there we go. I mean, you could say, why did Charles not get more out of the mediums at the end, which I did to Mark. And he said, well, he agreed with me, it just shows he's in a Ferrari and he's not in a McLaren. That's how bad the Ferrari was, that the mediums went off the way they did. So, yeah, good question though, Sarosh, thanks. We did talk a lot about that with Mark. I think hopefully that was helpful as well. Asish Anand 8052. If one of the McLaren drivers don't win this year with this car advantage, they may never win a championship. Well, yeah, it is a huge advantage. And the problem, I've sort of done the analogy before when it's, a final of a big tennis match and one of them falls over and sprains his ankle and he's out for 10 minutes and comes in limping with the bandage, and you think, oh, well, it's all over. And invariably the injured guy always goes on to win because the other guy thinks, oh, it's all over now, and he loses concentration. And it's a little bit like that with McLaren. They've been so dominant, and now they're kind of, caught headlights, rabbit in the headlights. They don't really know where to look in order how to progress now, because they've got 2 drivers capable of winning with similar number of points, but obviously one's ahead of the other. They've still got a great racing car from one race to the next. They're not getting the best from it. And then they've got this guy called Max Verstappen who's just going down the middle, splitting them all apart. And it's, from McLaren's point of view, they're in chaos mode, aren't they? I mean, it'll only take Max to have a problem of some sort. Let's hope that doesn't happen in Mexico, and McLaren to finish 1-2, and everything will be calm again, and everyone will say, oh, it's all back to normal now, McLaren, blah, blah, blah. It's very, very small, the margin we're talking about between this being this is a serious world championship, or a McLaren walkover. It's still very, very balanced on the knife edge. De Gea F1 YouTube says, Mexico 21, Hamilton P1, Bottas P2, Max P3, then Max P1 by turn 1. Great start. Yeah, well, it's a long run down to that turn 1, isn't it? It's a long run, and although there's no DRS, you can really get a tow. So in a way, it's not great to qualify on the pole in Mexico. P3 is not a bad place to be in Mexico, actually. Don't tell Juan Pablo Montoya. I only say that because I mentioned this once before. Montoya is the only driver I've ever spoken to who's ever said to me, when he qualified 4th, I think in Hungary, and I said, any problems with the car, 1 or whatever I said. And he said, well, I was trying to qualify 5th to be on the clean side of the road. I thought, wow, he's trying to qualify 5th, not 4th, not 3rd, 5th. Amazing. So yeah, qualifying 3rd is not a bad place to be in Mexico. Anything can happen on that first run. And, Oscar's in a very strong position if you think about it, because what he wants is neither Lando nor Max scoring points. So if there's a big brouhaha at the first corner, from which Max and Lando emerge limping, and Oscar's got no damage, that's nirvana for him. It's a strong position. Now, whether or not, of course, that's going to happen, because in the McLaren team, they're going to constantly be saying to him, whatever you do, stay away from Lando, don't hit Lando. And so, Max will be bright enough to know that. So, there's going to be a big gap between the McLarens, and Max is going to go down the middle probably. So Ashish Jain 5965. Cali Rovanpera has improved massively in tarmac rallies since last season. Do you think his road to Formula 1 is not as hard as it initially feels? I'm not saying it's hard at all. I think the guy's outstanding. And I love his Kimi Raikkonen-like approach of, he's just low-key Finn. No trouble to anybody, just gets on with it. Some days he doesn't really feel like it. Other days he's really touching the sky. And I think for him to have, and he did that test in Austria, didn't he, with the F1 car, with an old F1 car. He didn't go out and try to do anything. He just drove around quite slowly, did everything correctly, which is classic Cali, really. It's, the opposite to what you'd really think, which is what Cali's all about. He's a bit sort of opposite to the way you would imagine. And he's obviously gone away and thought about it and thought, well, I'm a bit fed up with changing wheels and getting dirty and muddy and all this stuff. And I've won 2 championships, maybe 3, probably 3 now in 2025. Although I hope Elfyn Evans wins it this year, because he deserves it. And he's talk about low key. I mean, talk about that. Brilliant. I'd love to see him win the championship and get BBC Sportsman of the Year. Do you think anybody at the BBC's ever heard of Elfyn Evans? It's pathetic, isn't it? Anyway, that's another matter. And Cali has just thought, no, I had enough of this, and I don't want to go rallying for the rest of my life. Motor racing. I'm going to go motor racing. Yeah. Got Toyota behind me. I love Japan. They love me. I'll go and do Super Formula. Mega thing. Great circuits. And hang out in Japan with all the teams there and really get into it. And if he goes well there, and I suspect he probably will from half year onwards, then F2, as I say, probably high tech. Great. Ollie Oakes. And then good hands there. And then F1 with Haas Ferrari. Or maybe Ollie Oakes' F1 team, who knows. But, he's got it all ahead of him. And I think he could do very, very well. Very well. I've got a lot of time for Cali Rovanpera. I think he's another Kimi. More than another Mika. I think he's another Kimi. Alvaz 04. What are your thoughts on Red Bull removing the tape used by Lando to know where to stop on the car on the grid? Sky Sports, quite childish. Well, I think it's kind of cool that Red Bull did that. You know, it's nothing to stop the moving bit of tape. It's could get stuck in somebody's radiator or something. You know, quite right. And you know, if the driver needs tape to stop, what's going on? He's supposed to be a Grand Prix driver. Should be able to stop on the button from any speed. Isn't that what Max does? You don't need tape to tell you where to stop. What's all that about? So yeah, you know, I don't think it's childish at all. I think it's quite good. Another super chat here from DGA F1 YouTube. Thanks, Peter. Miss EJ chats too. Yeah, I miss EJ. I was thinking about EJ the other day actually, and what a you know, I used to go and when he was in the proper Jordan F1 days, after practice, an hour after practice, after qualifying, I just meander up to the Jordan area and just knock on the door, and Eddie would be alone in the front on the phone, obviously. Oh, come in, and I'd sit there for like 3 hours while he's on the phone, and we'd have a cup of whatever or a drink of this, and then I'd disappear. Brilliant. Dr. O1D1, thanks for the cool content. Another super chat. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Harvey Postlethwaite. There's another one. Mark Gillum, that's right. Williams aerodynamicist. Lots of doctors we've had. Dr. Cesare Fiorio. Actually, it was quite funny. When I was working at Ferrari in 1990, Fiorio couldn't go to one of the FOCA meetings and delegated me in his place. And I was there between Bernie and Max, and we're doing all these things. And they said, so what's Ferrari got to say about this? Bernie said, well, what's Ferrari saying? And I said, well, Dr. Fiorio has instructed me. And they all laughed and said, what's this Dr. Fiorio business? And I said, he's a doctor. Didn't you know that? Yeah, it's a doctor. Treat him with respect. Yeah, there you go. So here we go, back to Soros again. If Newey didn't want to come to Ferrari unless he gets to operate from England, was that right? I don't think that was the case. Do you think Fred was correct to think that it's better to manage from Maranello? I don't think that was the reason he failed to go to Ferrari. That, you know, the Barnard was given the English operation, so he didn't have to fly to Italy regularly, and Adrian wanted the same, and therefore he didn't go. I don't think it was that. I think it was that he wanted to bring. It was clear after a while that if he was going to do Ferrari, he was going to do it with his team of guys, and there was going to be a massive shake-up in the drawing office. And I think Ferrari thought, the issues with the unions, the trouble with this is going to cause, it's more trouble than it's worth. I think, isn't that what happened? I think it is. To my mind, it was worth the trouble, but that's only me. And so that's why he didn't go, I think. Dega1F YouTube says, he's talking to Soros Sherman. Newey now lives in South Africa too, so don't think Italy will be a problem. Oh, in answer to that, well, he lives in Cape Town, and I think he only goes there in the winter months, doesn't he? Maybe in the August break as well. Hashish Jane 5965. What do you think is the ideal length of races for the calendar? 24 races too excessive. Oh, 18, 19, I'd say. This is a nice number. Bit more time between races. But, you know, you look at the money that Apple are paying now, and obviously Sky are going to be pushed into doubling that, and so on. You can see why Formula One teams want to have as many races as possible, because that's where the money's coming from TV, and having a race, just getting paid amongst the basically the prize money coming from the TV, so, and the starting money, and less is coming from sponsorship. So that's why they have so many races. The more races, the more money they make, basically. So that's why they're... Dega says, Dega F1, Mark Slade, a great addition to this channel. Experience of the last 36 years, invaluable. Thank you very much. Yeah, well, I'll pass it on to Mark, who might even be watching at this point. I told him we were live, and we were going to be showing the interview we did. And if we are, how you doing, Mark? Brian McClendon, 5289. In view of history and being Toto is no fool, would he really take Max over Russell given the adaptation period and shortness of this next reg cycle? Well, I think a lot of people on the internet have been saying, oh, Max to Mercedes, because it's a lovely story that they all want to talk about. And it's great clickbait stuff, isn't it? But, you know, for me, if you were Max, there would be no way you would not be thinking at one point, yeah, if Mercedes had got a car, I want to be in it. because when Mercedes have a good car, they win 5 championships, and I'm going to be doing that. So for sure, he's always got that option in the back of his mind. Equally, he's always thinking, I love Adrian Newey, so he's got that option in the back of his mind. Then he's got Red Bull ain't so bad. Great team, I love it now, it's working well, very good people. Wouldn't it be brilliant to win a championship without Adrian, just to prove we can do it? He's thinking that. And he may even be thinking, one day I'd love to drive for Ferrari. So the fact that Max has been talking to Mercedes and had an option in his mind that one day is completely normal and completely natural. Very different from Max has got an offer to drive for Mercedes in 27, and that means that he might have to replace George Russell. And what will Toto? It's not that at all. There's no way, in my opinion, that Max would ever go to Mercedes if the other driver was going to be George Russell. It would never happen. So that decision never has to be made by Toto Wolff. He would only go there if the other driver was Kimi Antonelli. So that's how I see it. Now, a lot of people would think, oh, that's really boring, isn't it? We've got to have Max versus George and what Toto would do, because it's a much better story on the internet. Well, I think that's where we're at. I think it's internet stuff that people want to talk about. Mac 790 Mark Hughes said the development of the Ferrari mid-season was to help Lewis but hindered Leclerc by making the car less responsive. He said the advantage of Leclerc Max reduces with a weak front. Did he say that? I think I said that, didn't I? No. That's exactly what I've been saying, so I'm pleased that Mark agrees with me. But Mark Slade has got another take on that as well. So have a look through the chat we just did with Mark and talking about Ferrari and how that's panned out. But he does agree with the overall philosophy, the overall conjecture, there's a better word, that of the car now being more suitable for Lewis in terms of his comfort zone. But because Charles basically doesn't have a sharp front end on a regular basis, he's just been reduced to being an average racing driver, as distinct from being superhuman. And we saw a glimpse of how good he can be in the wind in Austin and how well he drove. I don't think he was helped that much on race day, but I think in qualifying, that tailwind enabled him to be P3. And having got there, he thought, wind change for the race. If I just stick with what I've got, I could get blown away here by the McLarens, maybe even George. So I'm going to do a risky thing and start on the softs, see what happens. And it was exactly the right thing to do. And he read it perfectly, or he and his team read it perfectly. And that's why he was able to finish third in the race, I think. So good job for him all round by that. But yeah, I made that point. M. Hughes has made that point, which is that, you can make the racing car comfortable to drive, but it may not be quicker. And it may be better for some drivers, but for super quick drivers, it isn't quicker. And what any driver of the quality of Max or Charles or Carlos Reutemann or Nigel Mansell or Sterling Moss or Jim Clark, what any of them want is a front end around which they can then do what they do with short corners, trading off lateral load against brake, coming out of the brake pedal pressure. All those lovely things they do, unbelievably small detail, but beautiful to see the overall product. And they can do that with the front end. And they don't really care about the back because they know they can balance that. They've got the feel to look after an unstable rear. But as I said at the start of the year, as long ago as the start of the year, I think Lewis is at a stage of his life now where he just thinks a little more about everything. The risk and reward is something that enters his mind now in terms of the setup of the car. And if I go to that front end, I've got that instability at the rear, which I don't really like. Had enough of that at Mercedes post-22, post-21. And I want a rear that I can live with. Whereas I don't think Lewis 07, 08 would have had so much issue with an unstable rear. It's not that he can't control it, it's just he thinks about it more, that's all. But Charles has been doing that all his life, living with unstable rears. That's what racing drivers do, real racing drivers. They live with unstable rears. So a bit of chat here about infrabren. Yeah, not quite sure what that is. I'm probably being very slow there. Not quite sure. Dega 1, FU and Tube. A lot of smart people in Red Bull even without the great Newey. They figure it out too. It wasn't just Newey made them so strong, but still mistake by Ferrari, Mercedes not to hire him. Yeah, I think that's right. He is still the man, and I think he'll prove that at Aston Martin. Otherwise, he wouldn't be going there if he wasn't confident that he could still do it. So that's that. But yeah, you're right. Red Bull, contrary to what a lot of people thought, still doing very, very well. And it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I have no feel, really. I don't think anybody does for the 26 cars and what they're going to be like. But going to 50% electrification as they are, is the implication, therefore, that the power unit is going to play more of a role in the overall performance delta of the car than it has in recent times? In other words, is the input of an Adrian Newey less on a 26 car, potentially less than it has been on the cars of the last decade? Is there less scope? If you've got a great power unit, can you get by with a slightly less effective chassis, if that's the right split? And potentially that could be the case. We'll see. We'll see. It could be that all the power units are identical and that it all does come down to some incredibly small, minute aerodynamic detail that Adrian has discovered over the winter, which only Aston Martin have got. And for everybody else to catch up, it means building completely new cars. It could be that, but it may not. This is from Forza Ferrari, Z81. Hello, lads. Is Mexico's lack of high-speed corners going to hurt Ferrari's pace, considering how fast they were in Sector 1 in Cota? Or can Leclerc fight for back-to-back podiums? Well, they have got some pretty quick corners. They're called S's, and they're significant because they're followed by a long straight. And we talked about those again. I talked about those with Mark Slade, those S's. Very difficult. There are a lot of curbs there that can be used well or used wrongly. And very important, the change of direction, where Charles Leclerc will be really good, in my opinion. And I think Lewis will be too, based on what we saw in Austin. So I think, what we saw in Austin in Sector 1, going in through turns 3, 4 and 5, Ferrari was super quick there. So I think they'll be very good on those S's. And they will be good on that straight, therefore, after the S's into the stadium section. What they'll be like through the stadium and what they'll be like through the rest of the lap, which is a bit Mickey Mouse, apart from the long straight, then that's the real point, isn't it? But I think they'll be very good through those S's. I can't wait to see Leclerc through there, actually, and Lewis, for that matter. I think they'll be amazing to watch through those fast S's. Right. The MK Mike. The whole Racing Bull team was forged by winning, then chasing Mercedes for 7 years and dominating at the end. McLaren feel like they stumbled into a championship fight, and it shows. Yeah, you're kind of right. I think they did sort of surprise themselves with the dominance they've had. As I've often said, knowing why you're quick is much more difficult than knowing why you're slow in Formula One. And I don't think when they were dominating in the first 2/3 of the year, McLaren really knew why they were quick. They could see that they were quick and they were enjoying it and they ran it well and they won lots of races. But I don't think they actually knew, because if they knew, they would have developed the car to the point where it's still dominant. And so now they're thinking, well, everybody else is trying to catch up. Red Bull are kind of with us now, and Mercedes are making progress, and Ferrari presumably will catch up a little bit more. But do they really know why and how all that's happening? They're all going different routes for this, and they've all got different things they need to solve on the car problems. So it's all a big mystery, isn't it? Nobody knows what's going on. You just do it, and it works. Obviously being slightly facetious there. Taylor, 80277. Hi, Peter. I've always admired Frank Williams chose Claire to lead the team, but why didn't Jonathan take that role, given his stronger motorsport background? Would the outcome have been different? I think it would have been, and I think Jonathan would have, because Jonathan, like Johnny Dumfries, really, loved getting his hands dirty, but doing menial motor racing things at an early age and helping the team as a gopher, and then becoming, he got really into GP2, and he very close to the guys at iSport, Paul Jackson and the boys, and I always feel that had Frank said, yeah, Jonathan's the chosen one, that Jonathan would have done a very good job, because I think he would have brought the iSport team in and we would have seen some very good races in there, running that team very well with Jonathan taking a sort of chairman role. And I think it would still be going today. I think they would have done a very good job. But it didn't go that way. You know, I'm not going to make comments on the Leclerc thing because it'd be inappropriate. But to me, it was a shame that Frank didn't do that. KJM 0677 got some dolphin juice to share if you need any. Not sure what that means. I hope it doesn't actually mean dolphin juice. Is he playing a replay of the chat he already had? No, it was a brand new chat. I've taken one excerpt out of it, put it onto YouTube late last night. But otherwise, that's a brand new original chat with Mark pre-Mexico. So I counsel you to watch it. Dega F1 YouTube. In 67, Jim Clark won the Mexican Grand Prix from pole with fastest lap, finishing 1 minute 25 seconds ahead of the rest, despite his Lotus 49 having a broken clutch. It was his 24th Formula One Grand Prix win. And he celebrated by going to a bull ring afterwards and playing the role of a matador with a calf. Being a farmer, he felt pretty close to it all. I don't think Jim was in any way attracted by the blood and the gore, but I think he quite liked hanging out with the calves there and the wilds. He loved animals, basically, Jim. So he went there and he just wanted to see what it was like being they had horns. It was quite serious. He had the red thing, and just the reflexes moving around. Jim enjoyed that. And once in New Zealand, I don't know if I say to you trotting, do you know what that means? It's that sort of funny horse racing they do where the horses actually trot very, very fast and they have these very lightweight jigs behind them. And they race with the coloured jockeys' caps and everything. I don't know if it's big in Europe. I don't know if it is, but it was certainly big in Australia when I was there. And I think it was big in New Zealand. Anyway, after one of the Tasman races, Jim did that, had a go, and he was very good at it. He had a lot of affinity with the horse and he was very quick straight away. Well, the horse was. And I always remember Sterling Moss saying that this is when his sister Pat was winning dressage stuff on horses. Sterling saying he felt that dressage was the nearest thing to Formula One that he had experienced. The balance, the feel he needed on the horse, the understanding of the horse's body language. Interesting, eh? Anyway, that was from Mexico 67. Yeah, great win for Jim. Moises Solana drove a third works Lotus 49, Mexican driver. Sadly lost his life later on in I think in a sort of one of those cross-country roads they had in races they had in Mexico's in some sort of NASCAR type car. But yeah, Mexico 67, what a win. Made up a little bit for Jimmy's disappointments in Mexico. Particularly 64, when he should have won the championship by winning the Mexican Grand Prix that year, as I said at the beginning of the show. So next one, J's 8964. Peter, is it better having two short corner teammates for development direction or short and long corner drivers for broader chance for success, given the variables and setup changes? Oh, the latter, which is why I always said that Leclerc-Sainz is such a good combination. Very, very good. I think you need one good short corner driver if you've got a great car and you're a great Grand Prix team. And that's what Mercedes now have to some extent with Antonelli, but only really applicable to slow corners. But I think that's one of the reasons they're starting to go a little bit better on slow corners, is because Antonelli does have that short corner feel. Not all the reasons, but I think he definitely contributes a lot there. And I think one of the reasons McLaren a little bit lost in terms of development is because both drivers are pretty similar. They're both wide-ish turn in, late brake late, get on the power soon. Very, very smooth, supple inputs, both of them, which is a great thing. They're both good, very good in that respect. And Lando particularly has that lovely feel for coming out of the throttle and the brakes when he just lets the car settle if you think he's slightly overdone it a bit. Very, very good. But they're not short corner drivers. They don't lean on the front as much as, say, a Charles or a Max would. And so that means that in that area, I think McLaren are definitely losing. And that's why it's always good to have both. That's why, Max does what he does at Red Bull, and the other driver has very little input. I think just has to basically drive it the way Max has the car set up. And if they can't do that, that's their problem. But I still maintain Sainz, Leclerc, excellent driver pairing. Ferrari made a big mistake breaking that up. Next one. Good question, that. Thank you very much. KJM 0677. Haha, the driver who drives them to the podium It's all, I can't understand all that stuff. Dolphin juice again. So live, yeah, I did that. They're talking about the interview with Mark, and now we're live. We'll get Mark back on the show live when I get a better system going, which we'll do fairly shortly. Dega F1 YouTube says, Oscar the last 3 years has always seemed to get worse after the summer break. Has a drop-off. Maybe coincidence? Never really thought about it, but it's a long season. We'll see. I think he'll come back. I think Oscar will win one of the next 3 races. And then all the chat will change, of course. Whereas KJM says, no, it's Lando versus Max. Forget about Oscar. This is Shidagochiji. I can't understand that one. Sorry. Wouldn't you think people would still criticize instead of praising Lando for his performance when Piastri wasn't struggling this much? Well, again, you know, how people criticize or praise is kind of over my head because I tend not to have much time to read all that stuff. I can only do what I think and talk about the things that I see and think and feel, and with my friends like Mark and Scarbs and so forth. I need some skooma. Good question. Hope Peter and Windsor will cover your question and share their thoughts and insights. Okay, well, here you go. That's my thought and insight. I don't really understand. So here we go. Blah, blah, blah. More stuff. Wondering. Where are we going? Do you think, this is from Shidagochi again, do you think Lando's performance has been overrated? We've talked about that a little bit, I think. Do another one. Yeah, it's keep repeating here. You don't keep asking the same question. Peter, can you get Nigel Mansell for interview on your channel? What's it really like fighting for a championship? Bad one in 86, 92, especially now we have the 25 championship battle on. Yeah, well, I mean, Nigel would say it's all about, and not that I wouldn't want to get him on the channel, I'll try and do that, but he would say, you know, you focus, you work closely with the team, you don't worry too much about your teammate, you get on and do what you do, and if they support you, if the team supports you, you should do it if you're good enough and the car's good enough. Isn't that more what you do? Forza Ferrari, thank you, Mark and Peter. More great analysis as always. Ursula, hello from Greece. Thank you very much for all of those points. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate Mark taking the time again to join the live stream. I need some skooma again. This is, hi Peter, out of the current drivers, who's the best at fuel management and energy management? Well, I asked Mark about fuel, didn't I? And because it doesn't appear as if fuel as such, fuel management is a big issue that they don't have to worry about, are they going to get to the finish anymore? It's more a question of how they manage all aspects of the car, whether it be the temperatures, the tyres, everything else. But, you know, I can only go to the default Max Verstappen for that. I imagine he's the best on everything, isn't he? Why not? He's very good on tyre management, very good on using lift and coast correctly. Why wouldn't he be the best at fuel management and all the other management, energy management? He is. So there you go. Rupa Shane says, thank you, Peter, for the great insights. Did Max get new soft tyres because he didn't complete the second run in Q3? Still at the end, his tyres looked almost gone. Is Red Bull still too hard on tyres? I don't think he was on new softs, was he? I remember going through the list before the race, looking at it all, and what he had available was identical to McLaren. And I obviously had softs, but I don't think he had one new soft available that McLaren didn't. Will you give me 2 seconds while I look that up? It's a good question, good point, because he didn't complete that second run, but he did. I mean, they were pretty scrubbed. I mean, they were scrubbed enough, weren't they? I mean, he did the lap, and it was. It was enough to call them scrub tyres. So he didn't have a new set for the race. So where are we now? Okay. Peter, thank you so much for introducing us to Mark Slade. Excellent to listen to, makes everything he explains coherent and easier to grasp. Well, yeah, a lot better than me. That's for sure. Retro Gamer says that. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. This is from Another, as far as Jockey, we've had it before. We're going to see more mistakes from Lando and Oscar. Championship nerves is not to be underestimated, but I sense that bad luck may hit Max, as Formula One gods are not always kind. Well, yeah, you know, if you look at the great comebacks over the years of Formula One, although I said the only one that really stands up that worked was the John Surtees one in '64, and that was kind of coloured by all the unreliability of the other cars at the time. But Surtees still drove very, very well, no doubt about that, and was very good under pressure. The number of occasions in which comebacks have almost succeeded is, you know, it's almost double figures. And you've got some amazing ones then, but, you know, that could happen. You know, Max could fail by a couple of points, so be ready for it. Giant Putt 7066, I kind of like that one. I saw a guy with a putter head cover which the other day which just said do not 3-putt on it. Have Red Bull proved that they don't need Adrian Newey? I think they have, haven't they? They've proved a lot in the last few races. I mean, that flaw that they came up with, that they've had on the car basically since Monza, has been truly impressive, and they've developed it since. Very, very good. 10-4 Networks. Hi, Peter. Please share your perspective of Ayrton's offer to drive the Williams for free. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Yeah, well, this is all part of Ayrton. Yeah, Ayrton and Frank Williams were very, very close. Frank loved Ayrton and was the first guy to give him an F1 test. But he didn't do anything with it because he was already contracted to Jacques Lafitte and Keke Rosberg. So Ayrton went off and did his thing with Tolman and then Lotus and then went to McLaren. But through all that time, Frank always wished he could have had Ayrton, and Ayrton always wished he was driving for Frank. And of course it became a real thing when Williams started to win races and championships. And I don't know how to phrase this really, but from my perspective, Ayrton tried as much as possible to convince Frank that Nigel Mansell wasn't that good, and that car was that if Ayrton was in that car, he'd be much, much quicker. And I think Frank kind of believed that, and that's where all this business of, you know, let me drive the car for free, I'll prove it to you, Frank. It was that sort of thing. It was a joking thing, but he would have said that at some point, and so that's where that came from. Personally, I've always found that a bit distasteful, because I think to trash another driver behind his back to the team principle of that driver, I think is not on. But, you know, I know that for a fact because Frank used to talk to me about it, and Ayrton used to ring him at nights a lot. I'm not sure it was every night of the week, but certainly, you know, once or twice a week throughout his career. Quentin Hirschfeld 9382. Speaking of quick drivers over one lap, why did Arnoux seem to have lose his speed in the later stage of his Formula One career? Well, he was pretty good when he went to Ligier, wasn't he? But he was always a bit. He was very edgy, very spiky driver, very. So he was also on the edge of sort of Liam Lawson type mistakes, and I think as time went on, he became a little bit more lazy with his mental approach to it, and he just sort of enjoyed his racing more than he did take it very seriously in the way Alan Prost did. And I think it was that, really. I think it was, you know, he's just he loved his racing, and he loved being quick, and he loved winning. He's a very nice guy, funny guy, but he was always a spiky driver, prone to mistakes, and if you made a mistake, you just sort of write it off and carry on the same way. He just never really developed, I think, is what we're saying. And as time went on, that caught up with him, and he mentally, I don't think he was as strong as he could have been. So where are we going now? That was Arnoux. Needs some skooma again. Hi, Peter. Is it better having two short... Oh, we've had that one. Okay. I think as a general principle, just please ask one question rather than keep asking the same question, putting it in, because it just takes time to get through them all. Somebody here talking about Dega F1 says, Franco Colapinto, too many crashes by Franco, as well as unfortunately, because he seems a nice chap. Yeah, very nice chap. Lots of nice chaps in Formula One. They're all nice chaps, aren't they? But some crash more than others. Some have more feel than others. So Alpine, talking about Alpine not being very good. Haven't put Doohan back in for last 5 races. I know, it's a shame, isn't it? A good point here. If you mention Lewis, you should also mention Fernando, says Dr. O1D1. Yeah, and I will add that. That's a very good point. We tend to forget about Fernando a bit, but he's very, very good on tire management. As Mark Slade talked about, when they had the graining and Fernando was able to drive through the graining with the groove tires, and in general, he's so good at keeping the car nice and square and just feeling the surface of the road. And that's he just does it. He's brilliant. So next one, Degia says Max only 28 has 68 wins. Max at the age of 28 has 68 wins. Already the trajectory is well over 120 with a bit of luck. He's going to break every record, but that's what they are for Fangio, and did it for Schumacher and did it for Hamilton. And it will now happen for Max. Well, there we go. Peter, what happened to Benetton? Well, they sold out in the end. Made quite a lot of money, I think, to Renault. But it kind of came to an end when the cigarette advertising ban came in, because they had a lot of money coming from Mild 7 in Japan in the Briatore era. And when that went away, I think it was a short step away from let's make some money out of this and sell it, which they did. And the Benetton brothers, by that point, I think, had enough. Flavio had obviously started off working for the Benetton brothers, just working for Benetton long before they were in Formula One, was doing his own thing, and that was it, really. Great shame. I loved it when the Benetton brothers were around, Luciano Benetton and his brother, and their initial sponsorship forays with Tyrrell, Michele Alboreto, and then they did the Benetton deal. They were a great company, and they're still around, aren't they? I was in the shopping mall the other day, and there's Benetton still selling pullovers in a multitude of colours. I wonder how well they're doing. Probably not the same company anymore, but anyway. So there's a bit of chat going on amongst yourselves. That's fine, but I'm just trying to see if there's any that are appropriate for me or directed towards me. This is another super chat from @Mac790. Thank you very much, Mac790. Peter, Leclerc is at his best, is the closest to Max. After hearing your comments on concentration, that just may be the difference between the two drivers. Well, it's a good point, isn't it? I was saying how we underestimate how good Max is in just concentration. Focus is the modern word, thanks to Ayrton Senna. But concentration is a better word, I think. It just means not allowing your mind to wander and focusing exactly on what's going on. And when you're racing with somebody else, or you're massaging a tyre problem, or you've got to do a lot of lift and coast, all those variables come into play. Concentration's not an issue because you're focusing on them. But when the car is good and you're saying to your engineers, as Max did in Austin, don't need any flap adjustment if we come in again in the safety car, and the car's about where he wants it. He's got an empty track and he's just, the race is there to lose. He's under no pressure. That's when concentration can be difficult. And it only takes the mind to wander for a millisecond, and you've hit a curb the wrong way, or you've done this, or you've done that, and maybe damage, or worse still, maybe you've gone into a spin or something. And I think you're right. I think, Max is so good in that area. It's just like his brain just goes into this zone of nothing can touch what he's feeling or thinking. Whereas Charles, as we know, has gone off on his own. French Grand Prix a few years ago, good example, for no reason. And he's more emotional, so therefore potentially he's more prone to outside thoughts and emotions, which are also damaging to concentration. So it's a good point. I think that is, to some extent, what we're seeing. I don't think that'll ever go away from Charles. I think he'll always be that guy. And he'll always thrive when he's got other cars to race, and be less effective and possibly more incident prone when he's on his own. Donnie Platt says, good morning, Peter, from the US. Good morning to you. Nice to hear from you. Alessandro Durango 2766 says, "Hi Peter, after Charles' outstanding performance in Austin, would you say he's regained confidence in the car, or was it just a track specific situation?" No, I think he's definitely got a lot of confidence in the car, a lot of confidence in the guys on the pit wall, a lot of confidence in the mechanics, pit stops, everything. I think he's 100% confident with everything that's in his control or part of the team of which he's working with. So no, definitely the car's a lot better. And so it's not just circuit specific. Quite obviously it's not, because we've seen how well he's gone in the last few races. I still think he lost Singapore, or lost the chance to beat George at Singapore, because of that poor tyre choice on the grid. I think I'm the only person in the world that has said that, but I stand by it. I think he could have won Singapore if he'd started on mediums. Kagwa Henry, who's the fastest over one lap, Max, Leclerc or Russell? In which car? On what tyres? On which circuit? You can't really say, can you? Because there's so many different things in Formula One. That's the beauty of Formula One. It is about cars. It is about the way you use the tyres. And so you can never answer that question. You could put them in saloon cars, but what would that prove? I mean, what about the mini race? Silverstone 63, I think, I may be wrong, I think Graham Hill won it, maybe Bruce McLaren. Jim Clark was in it, he didn't win it. What does that mean? Nigel Mansell had that amazing door handle to door handle battle with Martin Brundle in the BMW County Saloon race at Silverstone, which Brundle won, only because Nigel was down the outside going into Woodcote and just wasn't going to brake, and didn't brake, and just went straight off on the last corner. Classic Nigel. He was either going to crash or he was going to win. He wasn't going to sort of just dutifully finish second behind Martin. Anyway, Martin drove really well that day. So there we go. Jazz says, Apple TV better show Peter the money and get some real... I'll rephrase that with the right intonation. Apple TV better show Peter the money and get some real analysis going on the platform. Oh, you mean getting me on it? Oh, well, that ain't going to happen, is it? It's far too technical, too long-winded, probably. They want short sound bites. And I don't talk enough about what types of shoes they wear, or, what they eat for dinner. That's what they want. That's what the young generation wants. Apple TV. No, it's good. I'm very pleased they've done that deal. And Apple, obviously, a very serious company. And I'm sure they'll do a good job. But I'd love to do some stuff with them. Yeah, why not? Somebody else, Doctor, says, I'd rather Formula One had done the deal with YouTube. That was an interesting point, and I wondered whether they had. I think German YouTube have done a big deal in soccer, haven't they? So I don't know whether YouTube are even a player for it, but it would have been interesting. So Jazz says, can you all please like the stream? 100 or so likes, but 486 watching. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's very kind of you to say so, and very touched. Not that many watching, probably because I didn't give any warning about this live stream, because I didn't really know if I was going to be able to fill this slot or not. But then something happened half an hour to go and we could do it. So there you go. So real racing drivers, says somebody. Yeah, well, what's that mean? Pretty sad. This is Martin Osterban. Pretty sad that the only device on which you cannot watch Apple TV is their watch. Just because of that, they should build it. Be a bit small, the picture, wouldn't it, I suppose? But anyway, there you go. I kind of assume there's a bit of chat about the Apple Watch here. Forza Ferrari says, thanks for your answer, Peter. Also excited to see Ferrari in Sector 2. Interesting how last year I remember their strengths were traction in low-speed corners. Things have changed. Well, they have changed. And that's because they don't have Carlos Sainz. They have Lewis Hamilton. It's a different car now. It'd be interesting to watch Carlos, though, in in turn 2 on the curbs there, and what he does and whether he's still got an advantage. And as Mark says, I wouldn't be surprised if Williams have a really good Grand Prix in Mexico. If they can get through it without any issues. They seem to have a lot of issues at Williams, don't they? Management side. But anyway, pretty good car. Two good drivers. Martin Osterban says, in Surtees' time, the cars were a lot more softly, relatively sprung. So I see that delicacy you need for both. Yeah, well, you need delicacy whether they're soft or harsh. Arguably, you need more delicacy when they're harshly sprung, because the car's even less forgiving. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of drivers turn up for a Rob Wilson day and they see Rob in his Ford Puma and they think, oh, what can I do in a road car? Sloppy old road car rolling from side to side, Formula One car, there's no roll, there's no this or that. And of course Rob says, yeah, but there's weight transfer. They say, well, yeah, but it's very fast. Yeah, okay. That's exactly the point. That's why a road car is going to accentuate your faults rather than, hide them. So get in, please. And they think, oh yeah, could be right. So Christian Horner, MO9255X, wants to know where he's heading to next. If I was Christian, I would relax and enjoy my life, but then I'm not. Or I would do what he might do, which is try and buy Renault or buy Alpine or whatever, or do a new team. Why not? Only young once. He says with a smile. So. Oscar Plada. And Surtees had to deal with all the political issues that Ferrari had. Remember the blue Ferraris? Well, that wasn't a real problem. That was a lovely problem because the cars looked great. And that was just Enzo Ferrari annoyed with the Italian Sporting Federation because they wouldn't homologate the Ferrari 250 LM to the tune of 50 cars, I think. And therefore, he was not going to be able to get the car into for Le Mans. There was a big drama going on about that. But the real drama Surtees had to deal with Dragoni, the team manager. And that's why he left the team 2 years later. Well, 1 and a bit years later. Because he just fell out with Dragoni in the end. And he walked away from a potential world championship. Probable world championship. 66 Ferrari V12 was a very, very quick car. 3 litre. And he could have won that championship. He walked out just after winning the Belgian Grand Prix in the wet. So all that stuff had been brewing. 65, 66, 67. And he left Mauro Foggieri, one of the great designers of the time. Ferrari or not, Foggieri was really good. And so, that was poorly managed by Dragoni, by Ferrari. They should never have let Surtees go, in my opinion. Surtees very much a man of his own principles, who said what he thought and liked a car to be the way he wanted to build it, or run it and set it up. But why not? The guy was good. He was really good. And so they never did that. Great shame. And he left. You know what the breaking point was? Surtees had a big shunt after at Mosport in 65, at the end of the 65 season, he's driving a Can-Am race in Mosport. And I think the front suspension broke going into turn 1. He had a big shunt going into the earth bank, broke bones. It was a big one. And recovered for the 66 season and did very well, as we know. But Dragoni thought that he wasn't up to starting the race at Le Mans because he still hadn't fully recovered from the Mosport shunt. So he said, don't be ridiculous. I'm right up there. I'm perfectly all right. It's my decision. I can do it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't think I could. And Dragoni said, no, must be, I can't remember. It was either Ludovico Scarfiotti or Mike Parks did it, I think. And so Surtees after that, he won the Belgian Grand Prix, but then he said, right, I'm out of here. If they don't respect me enough, I'm out of here. Can you imagine it being something that stupid? I've often thought, I know Jack Brabham won it in 66, and I'm so pleased he did because Jack Brabham won the 66 World Championship for Pete's sake. But as he always said, he beat the Ferraris, and that's what made it sweeter. And that's how he beat the Ferraris, just poor management. Quentin Hirschfield again says, Peter, I wondered, can the progress made by Williams be correlated to Sainz's technical feedback? I'm asking this because every engineers that work with him speak highly of him on this aspect. Well, he's very detailed and he's very good. But no, I think the Williams has been getting better over the last 18 months. Better people, better management, better structure. Still not there yet, obviously, as we were just saying, but a better car all round. And I think Alex Albon should be given some of the credit for that as well. I mean, he's a driver that is pretty much on the limit in terms of what a racing car can do. There are a lot of drivers on their own personal limits, which happen to be 0.2 slower than what another driver could do. But I think in the case of Alex Albon, that car is pretty much on the limit. So the good news for the engineers is that when they know the car is doing that, that is what the car is capable of doing. It's not a fudge factor in there. Alex Albon has his own shortcomings, obviously, as does Carlos Sainz. And one of the shortcomings of Williams is that they've got 2 wide turn-in drivers, pretty similar, actually, in the way they drive. Both of them pretty supple now. Both of them brake very late, and both of them try to get on the power as soon as possible. And both of them do that in a pretty supple, harmonious way. But they don't have the other extreme of a driver who could really use the front end of the car. We've been talking about that. It's the same thing as McLaren. But it is a better car. And yeah, Carlos, of course, should get a lot of credit for that. And he had a lot of issues at the beginning of this year, the first half of this year, whether it was ridiculous penalties or whether it was drivers running into him, not qualifying well, being in the wrong part of the grid where the accident was, things like that. And also these fair share of mechanical failures as well. But now the balance is shifting and he's starting to get a good run. And we're seeing how good the driver is that Ferrari decided to sack. That's what's going on. Degia, F1 YouTube. Jack Brabham versus Denny Hulme on this day in 67, Mexico Grand Prix title battle. Yeah, which Denny Hulme won. Jack had a problem and Denny won it. And I always respected Jack for his demeanour afterwards. Can you imagine what it would be like if you started your own Formula One team and you won your World Championship in 66 and then you'd also hired a young New Zealander and given him a real chance in Formula One, and that guy then beats you to the championship at the last race. It's your team, your car. And Jack was completely calm about it, very pleased for Denny, as far as I could see. They won the Constructors' Championship. And Denny was good. Denny was very good. I would say Denny at least as good as Lando Norris, probably better than Lando Norris. Very good. Serious racing driver. Okay, let's have a look. Martin Osterman says Benetton is still owned by the Benetton Group. Oh, well, that's good to know. Thank you. I had no idea. They just looked a bit sorry for themselves, I thought. The shop, there didn't seem to be anybody in there apart from all the pullovers were beautifully stacked, but nobody there. I almost felt like I should go in and buy one from them, but it wasn't the sale, so I didn't. And Just Vrins says, if the Red Bull has got that much better, wouldn't Tsunoda have improved more? Well, yeah, obviously. The better the car, the easier it is for a lesser driver to deliver. So on that note, be ready for Lance Stroll to get some podiums and maybe even a win in an Aston Martin next year, if the car's good, which I think it will be. So yeah, Yuki should have, and therefore the car isn't. That's why I keep saying the McLaren is a better car still. So there we go. Susie Perry says, let's get Nigel on the show. Triple exclamation mark. He'll do it. Peter, what are we going to talk about? Golf, Nigel. Okay. Right, we'll get Nigel. Once I get my live stream sorted, because he's not a patient man. If I say, Nigel, you've got to wait half an hour while I sort out this issue here. I'll say, I'm off out of here. Where are we? Joel Mervanderley says, he started on softs because they still had doubts on where the car was at. Hindsight stuff. We talking about Max in Singapore now or Charles in Austin? Probably both. So Quentin Hirschfeld says, in my opinion, young generations don't care about gossip. It's just that the people promoting the sport induce that kind of interest in them. Isn't that interesting? I have no idea. I mean, I can only speak for my son, who's 14 now, and he's not interested in gossip, fashion, nothing. He's never on the internet looking at that rubbish. The only time Jack uses the internet is when he's doing a rally stage in a, Lancia Stratos, or he's doing some astronomy stuff because he loves the stars as well. And that's it. Otherwise, he's out there doing his stuff. But I'm just assuming, because of the way we see all this luxury stuff, from the hospitality zone and all this rubbish, I'm assuming they've done a survey and they think that's what all the young viewers want to see. It's just an assumption on my part. And I'm pleased to hear that, in your opinion, I'm wrong about that. Because it would be nice. I mean, logically, you would think the younger generation would be interested in the technology and getting behind the scenes of why things have happened, as distinct from, I like Carlos Sainz because he wears nice shoes, And let's hope that is the case. Moman Youth says, hi, Peter, all the way from Africa, Kenya. Started watching Formula One from 24. Great insight. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much. Very kind, and best wishes to you in the continent of Africa, one of my favorite places as well. Sujo says, I watched Petit Le Mans a few weeks ago. One of the founders of BMW M came on commentary and talked about the BMW M1 Pro cars and how he had to convince Bernie to get the F1 drivers in them. Really? Well, Bernie had to convince Carlos Reutemann to get him one, I can tell you that, because Carlos wasn't keen on doing it over a Grand Prix weekend, but he kind of enjoyed it in the end because he was able to meet people like Willie Kausen and all those Germans, those maniac Germans, as he used to call them, because he loved to talk to them about the Nürburgring and how they drove the Nordschleife. So that's what got Carlos fired up about doing Pro Car. Of course, then there was the other business that they had to do it. The team owners were being paid quite a lot of money to force their drivers to do it. I can't remember what it was. It was the top 6, I think, in qualifying, then had to do the Pro Car race. It's a pretty cool thing. And, of course, there'd be brown envelopes Bernie would be giving out on the grid to everybody. I wonder what was in them. Probably an invitation to a nice dinner at Mr. Chow or something in Knightsbridge. You think that's what it was? Probably. And Carlos won at Brands, didn't he? In that famous week when he finished third in the Grand Prix, won the Pro Car race at Brands, same weekend, and then finished third in the Argentine Rally, round of the World Championship, in a factory Fiat 131 Abarth. Wow. Carlos Vic Elford Reutemann. Right. Hi, Peter. I watched the 2006, this is from Oscar Lindgren again, 2006 Turkish GP2 race. Incredible wheel-to-wheel racing. Lewis, Piquet and Glock. Yeah. And I can't remember his name now. Who was that other guy that he had I think he had a Dubai racing license or something. I can't forget his name, but he was very quick. But yeah, Lewis was amazing, wasn't he, going through there? Amazing. And he did the same thing at the British Grand Prix GP2 race as well. Not quite as many cars, but I remember I was standing, for some reason I was in race control watching that. I had a great view of turn 1 and Lewis was just amazing. Every lap he was 1 or 2 cars he was passing. Just fabulous. Alex Rimmel 9196. Hi Peter, great show as always. Thank you very much, Alex. Do you think one DNF for Max will rule him out of the title fight? Yes, I do. That's how knife edgy it is. I think if Max has a DNF, almost certainly a McLaren will win, so it's a double whammy. It's not just Max having the DNF. So, because they got 2 cars, that's where having 2 good drivers is a good thing, I suppose. But then they've still got their own problem. But yeah, Max has got to finish every race, and that's the hard thing. It's easy it's not easy. I mean, Max would look into the mirror and say, yeah, of course I can win every race, but will the car let me win every race? Would be what he's thinking. And those doubts, he can have those doubts. They won't affect anything. But to finish every race, not easy. Particularly if, it's a reverse situation to the one in 21. Particularly if one of the guys you got to beat, obviously has a lot more points than Max. And so for that guy, Oscar, it's great news when, as I said before, when both Lando and Max are out DNFing. So that's why it's such a long. Even now, he can do it. Of course, Max as a human being can do it, but whether, given the way Formula One is and the ease with which you can fail to score a point in a race, even if you're Max, then it's still a very, very big ask for him to win the championship. The best thing he can do, of course, is to try to qualify on the pole in every race, which of course he always does anyway. But if he's on the pole for every race between now and Abu Dhabi, then he's got a pretty good chance of avoiding at least the first corner accident and getting away out there and controlling the race in his own pace. So that'll be the way they'll want to do it. Now, Mexico, very good example. He may well get the pole in Mexico, but come the braking area, he may be P3. And then it's going to be more of a race. Says, right, almost a 10. Hi Peter, if Max pulls this off, where would you rank it in championship history? He's had the 4th or 5th best car for much of the season, at the very best, the 3rd overall, the best ever. Well, it'll certainly be the biggest comeback ever in the history of Formula One. That we've established that, and I mentioned that at the start of the show, thanks to my friend Corey Passatoro. And And that should not be taken lightly. But yeah, if you look at the way he continued to fight and score points even when the car was not very good, if he does win the championship, you could say, well, that's where he won the championship. Never gave up. Never gave up. And he's still going to be the same right to the end now. So there's a lot of replies to one another, which is fair enough, all chatting amongst yourselves. Good question here from C. Taylor -IVX2XH. Do you have any remembrance of Rob Walker as a team owner? I do indeed. I knew Rob very well. He was a very good, lovely man, very kind to me. I revered Rob, not only because of what he did with his birthright, which was create a Formula One team, a race team, sports cars as well, of course, and enter cars for the drivers like Sterling Moss and Joe Bonnier and latterly Joe Siffert, but also for how he led his life and how he wrote for Road and Track with longhand in pencil, very slowly, very laboriously, and just all the lovely things. You know, his wife Betty, who used to bring brownies, homemade brownies to every race, and Mario would make a beeline for them always. And it was fun watching Rob after the race, wearing his cravat and his blue blazer and chatting to drivers in the way that you see we have the bull ring thing now. But Rob used to go up and say, "Hello, Mario. What happened at the start there? It looks as if you were a little bit slow off the line." "Well, you're right there, Rob. You know, I had a problem with first gear. 1 second, Mario. Problem." And he would write it in longhand in pencil. And Mario would look over the notebook to make sure Rob was writing the right thing. And yeah, he was lovely. And he spoke, I mean, he had these wonderful stories about, you know, having the old whiskey flask in the Delage at Le Mans. And he spoke good French. "Et puis le drapeau avait tombé," you know. And it was that sort of franglais. Yeah, lovely guy. Beautiful part of the world in which he was based. Pitbrook Garage in Dorking. And won that British Grand Prix with Joe Siffert. You know, what an amazing thing that was. Let alone all the stuff he did with Sterling and all the races he won. In one of the first Cooper customers, one of the first Lotus customers. You know, Rob Walker did a lot. He won Lotus's first Grand Prix. He won Cooper's. No, he didn't win Cooper's. He won Lotus's first Grand Prix. Incredible, eh? So, yeah. A few more questions, and then we'll get going. Dexter. Flavio G, 23. "Hi, Peter. Is it possible to see if I'm a short or long corner driver in a kart? I'm curious to know. Thank you for all your insights you give us. Greetings from Switzerland." Yeah. You would definitely have a feel for wanting to shorten the corner and extend the straight is more of an issue. Not an issue, it's more on which to focus. Extend the straight, so you start the turn still with power, and then managing coming out of the power, braking into the apex. Now, kart is super stiff and super darty, so everything is like that. And you've got to be very flicky with the steering in a way that you would never be in a suspended racing car. But the overall feel of where you want to go is there, definitely. I was watching, I'm going to try and bring them into the show somehow, but Charlie Lucas, who, great racing career, I mean, the Titan Formula 3 cars, very close to Frank Williams, Piers Courage, very good racing driver in his own right, sent me some home movies the other day, just wonderful. And there's some pictures there of Piers Courage in a kart. When karts were at their infancy, they're all sort of sitting up very upright and got, you know, very small wheels and just looking a bit sort of clumsy. But nonetheless, he's out there racing with Charlie Crichton Stewart and other quick guys. And you can see there, you can see Piers is just going a little bit earlier than Charlie. And you can see how he's living with it. And he's just correcting a little slide before it becomes a big one. So yeah, you can. I'm not. What I've just said about short corners in karting isn't related to those videos. But I'm just saying that was a very recent thing. But yeah, if you were to watch, I mean, I saw it with Michael. That's one of the reasons I went to Kirpen to watch Michael in karts. I think it was about 04, 05 maybe, was wet. And I wanted to see whether Michael drove a kart the way he drove a Formula One car. And putting aside the dartiness of the kart, yes, he absolutely did. He was getting in slightly earlier than all the quick guys around him, quick young guys around him. So, yeah, definitely. So, Karsgan says, Peter, how hard does a helmet pull on your head at 300 kilometers an hour on a motorbike? On a motorbike, you feel it at 150. Well, again, we've talked to Mark about this relatively recently. And yes, aerodynamicists have played their role in helmet design, deflectors and various things. Yeah, reducing buffeting is the number one, or eliminating buffeting is the number one priority for a helmet. Beyond that, you want to maybe direct air somewhere useful. But in my experience, reducing buffeting is not that difficult to do. You can, obviously height has a bearing on it, windscreen shape, all those things, and everybody's slightly different. The helmet designers and manufacturers are very good now working on those things. So it's not an issue in the same way it was for Chris Amon in an open face helmet. You look at pictures of Chris back end of the 66 French Grand Prix, and you'll see his helmets like this and his goggles are like that, and that's all due to the speed on the straights at Reims in the Cooper Maserati that he was racing. And Jim Clark too. You often see when he started the 62 season with a peak on his helmet, and if you look mid-race, mid-season, British Grand Prix, there's no peak, and that's because in the Belgian Grand Prix through the Master King, the peak just flew off his helmet, and he just thought, well, I won't have a peak anymore because the famous white peak, because it could happen again. And that was because the fastening wasn't brilliant. It was an Ever-Oak helmet, and it had a couple of studs and then a sort of tape thing around the back. But when Bell came out with the Bell Magnum, that was a major step forward with the way the peak was properly fastened to the front of the helmet, and that's when Jimmy got the peak back again. Les Leston helmet too was very good, like that 64 he had that. So yeah, been a lot of developments, and I mean one of the most recent, not recent at all, but a while ago when I was at Ferrari, when the 90 Ferrari started to show its strength at Imola, when Nigel was pretty quick in that race at Imola, Alan Prost was complaining a lot about cockpit buffeting, and we got that sorted for the next race very quickly. I think part of it was he realised how quick the car was, and suddenly he was less worried about the buffeting. But anyway, he would disagree with that. So, reggae-wise, does Piastri need Norris's data? Because Piastri always gathers speed during a weekend. Does that hinder Piastri in a sprint weekend? Well, I mean, Piastri's only going to look at the data that the engineers think he should look at, which they're all open to receive. And I think they're like most teams, they're just in a system of how they do that and how they look at the other drivers' data and what it means when they run this set of tyres, that set of tyres, this fuel load, and they're all cross-relating the data. I don't think it's any more or less than you see in any other team. Maybe not Red Bull, where Max probably doesn't really care what Yuki's doing. But for every other team, normal team, it's that normal cross-pollination. And I don't think Oscar's been suffering from that. I think Oscar's been suffering because he's confused about how to be as a racing driver. And when you start to clip the wings of a racer like Oscar, it's kind of difficult still to be very quick as he was, but not be aggressive as they want him to be. And as I always said, that was always going to be the problem. As I said from day one, if that's what Zach's master plan is, I'm not very impressed. Almost a 10 says, further question, how many of the different cars on the grid do you think Max would have found a way to win a race with this year? Definitely Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, Racing Bull, Williams. Would he have won in a Ferrari? That's a good question. What race would he have won in a Ferrari? Don't know. I don't think he would have, actually. I'd like to think that between them, that's a pretty good barometer of where they're at. I mean, it's again, it's a difficult question to answer, because when Max goes to a different team or a different car, for sure, he will want to start to set the car up the way he wants to drive it. And although Charles likes the front end that Max likes, he's probably not quite as good at Max as knowing how to sort the rear when you've got that front end. Maybe he is, but maybe they would have listened more to Max if he went there than to Charles, I guess is what I'm getting around to saying. What are the other teams you mentioned? McLaren, yeah, for sure he won on a McLaren. Racing Bulls, yeah, I think he would have won in a Racing Bulls. Probably would have won Zandvoort or something. Mercedes, yeah, for sure. Williams, no, probably not. Although he might have whipped them into shape a bit more than they are. They might not have made as many sort of not strategy, but sort of management errors as they have. This has got a crown and number 1 next to Max 790. Peter, how did Nigel adapt to IndyCar so quickly? He was the same age as Lewis. Is age really a barrier? No, age isn't a barrier. It's basically your mental approach and how you, as I said before, I think when you're older, you do tend to think before decisions are made more than you used to when you're 21. So that's one thing. But I think Lewis is doing that more than Nigel ever did. I don't think Nigel changed in that area very much when he got older. And I've always said, peripheral vision is the thing that would go first physically. And so long as you've got your peripheral vision, then all the other great things you've got athletically that have taken you to where you are will still be there. And I think that's the case. And in Nigel's case, I don't ever remember Nigel getting into a car or going to a new circuit and not being instantly as quick as that car would go or as quick as that circuit would allow. He was very, very good at adapting, as all great drivers are, to be honest. It's just that Nigel is a great driver as well. Yeah, and of course he got used to a banking very easily. He got used to the Lola very quickly. It all just fitted into place for Nigel. He had that big shunt in Phoenix testing, but then again, it didn't make him back away. He just rationalized what had happened and made sure he didn't make the same mistake again. I think he just got a little bit high, didn't he? The back end came out a little bit. But otherwise, easy to adapt. Whether it was a rally car, touring car, Nigel was always right there, straight away. Never a problem adapting. Left-hand drive, right-hand drive, whatever. So, okay. Getting near the bottom now. WCR Movies, interesting title. I think Piastri or Norris needs a statement drive like Verstappen, Austin 21 or Button, Brazil 09, really to assert their credentials. Can you think of other situations like that? Thanks. Well, I think that's more of an outsider's view of maybe how a racing driver thinks. I'm not sure that those statement drives, as you describe them, have the impact that you would imagine, because it still comes down to feel for the car, turn in, unstable rear, crosswind, tyre management. All those things are still factors, whether you've just had a statement win or not. And believe me, every win is a statement win if you're a racing driver. Every win. They're all great. And if you win from start to finish from the pole, sometimes that can taste even better, because then it's total domination and you just thought, where was the opposition today? That can do perhaps even more for you than anything else, overcoming conditions, starting from the back of the grid, all that stuff's there, but it doesn't actually add up to anything more than the win from the pole. So it's more about feeling completely in sync with the team, with the car, and knowing how you are as a driver and recognizing your faults rather than living off your great moments. And the great drivers will have a great weekend, like Max in Austin, and the Monday morning they will look in the mirror and say, what could I have done better today? What was my failing this weekend? And I will bet everything I've got that Max thinks that way. It's not living on the high, it's being self-critical. So Flavio, the karting question from Switzerland, thank you very much. I'll have a look at my onboard. At least I will try to do so. Yeah, do that, and also try to look at pictures from the outside, not necessarily your onboard, but if somebody's filming, you've got a friend or whatever, you going into a left-hander, 90-degree corner from the straight, and then keep the camera still and watch others doing it. That's how you'll get a better feel for what you're doing. Last question, I think Nick Woodbridge 6291. Hi Peter, should Williams just keep the livery from Austin? It looked very nice. Yeah, it looked nicer than everything they've had. I agree. Wasn't sure about the McLaren one. All that loss of the orange, I don't think that worked. But yeah, Williams looked a little bit more, acceptable. But I still think they should go back to Frank Williams dark blue with nice white pinstriping. What's wrong with that? It's what Frank had. Why not do that? And the sponsors would look great on there. Okay, we've got more questions coming in, but I'm going to have to wind it up now, guys. It's 2 o'clock Spanish time. We started at 11:30, 12:30, 1:30. It's 2.5 hours. Okay, brilliant. And thanks again to Mark Slade. We'll get more of that, and I'll be back with videos, obviously, over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday from Mexico. And equally, I'd like to thank Jetcraft, REC Watches, Track Ninja and OEM Exclusive for their support. Without them, we wouldn't have Mark Slade on the channel. We wouldn't even have the channel, really. So there you go. Please do all you can to support them. In the meantime, take care and be safe.